OTB's The Hurling Pod with James Skehill and Paul Murphy.
Tá craobhna here in an eis an gaillimh. People of Galway, we love you.
I don't want to leave the people of Waterford down, you know, because they're my life, you know. People of Waterford are my life, you know, and I love me county, you know.
We love John Malone.
It's almost like they're afraid to kind of go and hurl and just let themselves express themselves. It's like as if they're nearly afraid to make a mistake, and sometimes you have to make a mistake and just throw off that bit of nervousness and have a go.
Yeah, it's pure constipated hurling.
You are very welcome along to episode 17 of the Hurling Pod. We're now down to 6 teams remaining in the race for the Liam McCarthy following wins for Cork and Wexford last weekend. We'll be looking ahead to this Saturday's quarter-final doubleheader at Semple Stadium. Clare will be looking to put their Munster final disappointment behind them when they face off against Wexford, and Cork will be looking to overcome Galway. Plenty of frustration in Clare at the weekend with Peter Duggan and Rory Hayes hit by 1-game suspensions, but the CCCC were they influenced by the discussion of the incidents on the Sunday game? That is a question mark following on from last weekend. We'll also be hearing from the longest serving current senior intercounty hurler, that is Derek McNicholas of Westmeath. They've secured Division 1 League and Leinster Senior Championship hurling for 2023, and he is heading into what would potentially be his 19th season of his intercounty career. Remarkable from Derek McNicholas, who scored the goal in their draw against Wexford in the championship this season. But as normal, we've got Paul Murphy and James Skehill with us. How are you getting on, lads?
Great now, Will.
Yeah, that's how we...
Paul Murphy, how much are you looking forward to potentially playing before an All-Ireland football semi-final, which could be, if things go as probably expected, might well be Dublin against Kerry. Before that, could well be Kilkenny against Warwickshire, maybe in an All-Ireland junior final.
Yeah, you just broke the news to me before we came on, so it's I actually got a bit nervous when I saw the message there. But yeah, it's incredible. It's a great incentive to, like, obviously we knew we were going to be playing in Croke Park, but we didn't know there was going to be a fixture after us. Well, I didn't know anyway. So the potential that, again, not jumping the gun, but 2 Paul Murphys could be playing football in Croke Park the same day. So I may get on to Paul Murphy at Kerry and just see, has he any tips for me for that day. But look, we have to win our first match first and not take our eye off the ball there and get into Croke Park in the first place.
Nice. It could be exciting times. It could be a rush for tickets. Self and Skehill will be the first ones onto you to try and get tickets to watch that final. Look, I think it's a great incentive though, Murph. If you think about it, right? The Tailteann Cup is going to be on the Saturday just before the first of the semi-finals, and then potentially, if you were to win, you'd be on the Sunday afternoon at 1:30 before the second semi-final. Like for the lower grade competitions, and we've been talking about this in hurling all the way along too, this provides a perfect shop window to go out and play football on a big occasion.
Well, it does, yeah, absolutely. And like traditionally, when Kilkenny for the last 10 years or so have been playing over in England and different things like this, and people were looking saying, "Jesus, isn't it great? You get a trip over to England for a few weekends and different things." But I suppose the carrot this year was that you were going to play in Croke Park, and for me, I was going, "Well, that's brilliant." Like I know I've played there plenty of times, but I was thinking, "Geez, I'd love to go back up there again and play, and especially play football up there." So, like, if you said that to me, that's enough, and that's it for a lot of the players. We were going, "That's brilliant. Try and get to Croke Park." And that's exceptional, you know, and that's what we want to do. But the fact that now there's going to, like, if you do get there, an All-Ireland semi-final is going to be on after you. Like, it's, you know, it's nice to be associated with such a big day like that. And obviously, by the end of that game, if you are to get there, for whatever 2 teams are in that final, you're going to have probably 50 or 60,000 people obviously drifting in for the match that's going to be on after it. Like, that in itself will be special. Okay, they're not there to watch you, but, you know, you have a feel for that atmosphere, and a lot of players who will be on the pitch won't have experienced that before, and they'll forever more be able to have it. So look, whatever 2 teams get into the final and play it, obviously I'm hoping to be there. It'll be a great experience, and fair play to the GAA for organising it, because again, like you said, it gives great publicity to it, and I think the more of this they can do, the better.
Skehill, a lot of anger on Friday night, frustration from Clare supporters particularly. I noticed in the Galway camp there doesn't seem to be much outcry about Keenan Fahey getting a 2-game suspension. We kind of expected that. You were talking about it last week, that the stamp was always likely to lead to a ban. But the 2 incidents which were heavily talked about on the Sunday game, well, 3 really, because we're not actually sure which one of the Peter Duggan instances led to this 1-game suspension, but Rory Hayes too. 2 key Clare players, as things stand, unless they were to win an appeal later in the week, are going to miss the game against Wexford. And it has refired all the debate about retrospective action and even trial by media to a certain extent.
Yeah. I think starting from a Galway perspective, there's been no issue. Like, I think we as a county have accepted the suspension for Keenan because we did. First of all, we don't condone the action, and like we know he got a 2-game ban, which is more than what the 2 boys got.
We don't condone the action, but I suppose from a process perspective, in the way that he got the ban, it looks to be tried by media as well. The referee missed it, the linesman missed it, all the officials who were there on the day of the game to officiate and overview the game, let's say, all missed it, and it was only picked up through media. So it can be easy to be seen. Like, I mean this with the greatest respect now, but if he was a player of huge importance to Galway, let's say for example, if it was a Dahi Burke who was the absolute pillar of the defence, or it was Conor Whelan, then I might say there could be a bigger outcry. Let's say that's why I think the Clare people. There's two things. One is the level of importance that the Clare players carry. Like Rory Hayes has been arguably their best defender of the year so far, and Peter Duggan has been the guy who has been kind of the launch pad for long ball up to the forwards. So you're losing two of your big players, and I think the Clare supporters will look at the game itself and see more incidents that developed and try to point towards that. Well, then why weren't they, sanctioned, or why weren't they suspended? And again, it's just like you mentioned before, it's about the whole transparency issue. And I think we're a step or two behind rugby, whereby they're quite forthright in even identifying the sighting. They'll put up video of it, on they've no problem putting up on social media, and the panel will make their own decisions. And it's quite a clear process of when the sighting commences, when the hearing is going to be. So there's no, like, will he train, will he won't train, will he join the panel, will he won't join the panel, will he be available? The hearing will be X days after the incident. It'll happen. The result will be 24 hours later, and you move on. Whereas in GAA, we're still a step behind that. So I can see why the Clare people are aggrieved. And from watching social media over the course of the weekend, there was a lot of content, if you like, from Clare players alike as well, and even some Limerick folk. I see that that they were saying that the whole process was incorrect, which I agree with. I don't think any Clare person, there's no Clare person I've seen online who has condoned the action of either Peter or Rory. So that's the first thing, but it's definitely around the process.
Yeah, when it comes to this, Murph, I think if things were a lot clearer, it would be easier maybe for supporters to accept what's happened. And James O'Connor was even writing at the weekend that Clare supporters could have a genuine grievance about the way that things were covered on the Sunday game last week, because it was these three incidents we're all talking about, Clare players, they were highlighted, and because the CCCC have got the power to go back retrospectively to look at something that wasn't punished by the officials at the time. So if the incident is missed in the eyes of the committee, they can go back and retrospectively have a look at the footage. Naturally, they're probably going to be somewhat swayed by this. The only thing is, if the CCCC explained that they were looking at, say, 9 different incidents from last weekend, and we only hear about the 3 that have actually resulted in suspensions, I think people would be less annoyed. When we don't know, and there's that kind of vacuum of non-information, straight away you assume that it's only because Cummins and Dowling discussed it in the Sunday game that these were up for debate at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked, I think, in one of our first podcasts just about players getting frustrated when referees don't explain what decision has come about and explain the process to them. Well, this seems to be on a larger scale, this one, basically, because you're left with the result, but you don't know exactly why it's after happening. Like we were chatting about there, that which one of Peter Duggan's, let's say, the incidents he was involved in, and that's not to highlight him even more again, but again, there was 1 or 2. So there's a lot of questions there, and obviously enough, Clare have dealt with quite a bit over the last year or so, or 2 years, in terms of, let's say, the penalty against Tipperary down on the Ennis Road, as it was called, then the COVID case and things last year. And you kind of, I suppose you nearly build a siege mentality in that case, because you feel there's a few things going against you. So obviously, they put up a great battle against Limerick, look like they're going for a quarter final, and then suddenly they get the results of it but don't understand the process, which I think you certainly win over a few more people. I don't know, is that the right term? Win over the right people, or a few more people or supporters, when you explain the situation. And like you were saying, Will, after a weekend, if we hear on Monday morning, like this morning we heard the draws for the football on Radio 1, whereas if it was announced on a Monday morning the CCCC are looking into a few cases, you might go, okay, this is coming down the tracks, and then they explain something, you might actually go, okay, I can kind of get on board with this. But a lack of information there, I can understand the frustration there from supporters when you're now down 2 of your best players, but maybe there's not as much explanation around the lead-in or the thinking into it.
Oh, look, you two can both give me a perspective on what it's like from a player around suspensions. I've only ever seen it from the journalist point of view, and how it exists here is you usually know somebody who's involved in either that committee or the DRA, and you get in contact with them and say, send me a text if something happens, particularly around an appeal. And that's how you find out. It's not like rugby or in soccer where, quite literally, if this happens in the Premier League tomorrow and somebody is up for a disciplinary, you will get an email from the FA saying that they're looking into an incident from last week and such has requested an appeal, or they've got however many hours before they need to lodge their appeal. You'll then find out that the appeal is taking place, and pretty promptly after the decision is made, there will be an announcement of the suspension, why it's happened, and that the appeal happened or not. So it's really transparent. Again, in rugby, somebody will be cited, and then you will hear that the citing is due to take place on such and such a day, and then you will get the full disciplinary come out by email to the media afterwards. And straight away, everybody knows, clubs, players, media, everyone knows exactly what happened, what was looked into, and what the consequences are. In the GAA, it operates far more like a secret society, where literally if you don't know somebody in the county board who was maybe up at the hearing with the player, or if you don't know somebody who's sitting on the committees, you're not going to find out. And in this case, it was like on Friday, and obviously information got out to a few outlets that the two Clare lads and also Fahy had got the suspensions, but no more information on it. And like, that's the thing about the Duggan one, is that there were two Duggan incidents that were talked about in the Sunday game. There was the Sean Finn one, and there was also the alleged strike on Will O'Donoghue. Not sure which of the two led to a suspension. So if he goes to appeal, I'm not sure what he's actually appealing this week, unless you talk to someone in Clare County Board who might be going up to the appeal. Like, Skell, that seems crazy to me. I mean, you were telling us before we came on that you were cited in your rugby days, and it was incredibly clear by comparison. Well, look, it's down on the record. You were cited and you were hit with a suspension, right?
Welcome to the rugby pod.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. Look, I wasn't innocent either, so it's not like as if I had to go and portray my innocence. It was trying to go and trying to get the least amount of suspension possible. But the process was way different. Like look, admittedly, I've been sent off in both rugby and hurling. And you're saying, as a goalie, how in the name of God are you sent off in hurling? But yes, I have been sent off. And I've got straight reds in both, right?
We'll come back to why that was, but tell me about the rugby first.
Okay, but the rugby, I'll just tell you about the form of it. So the rugby, I got a letter to my house 3 days after the incident. So the match was on like a Sunday, and I got a letter like on the Tuesday, Wednesday. And then the rugby club got a letter as well. So it was a hearing that was fixed on a hotel up, let's say, in the Midlands somewhere. And the hearing, that went to the hearing, I didn't have to be there myself. I could be represented by a club official or a third party, which is fine. Gave it the case, and then I got 24 hours later, I got a judgment of a suspension. So it was very, very, sharp, fast. I knew exactly what was coming ahead of me, and it was moved on. On the hurling terms, it took weeks. So I got sent off on a Sunday, and then there was no hearing for ages. I couldn't find out information off our club secretary or club chairman. I was trying to go to the county secretary, couldn't find out anything. There was a committee to be chaired together because there was 12 or 15 different people who could be picked to be on this 3-4 man committee. It finally happened, and I got a suspension that was actually served by the time I had the hearing. So it was quite unorthodox, if you like. But look, I think maybe that was the reason that suspension was or the reason that hearing was so pushed off was because we actually got knocked out of our championship. So I'd say maybe it wasn't quite as important, or needed to be quite as immediate for. But I think the processes, like from my experience, there's huge differences. Like there's chalk and cheese, and I think the GAA in general, like we have a lot to learn from different sports and how we go about our processes, and definitely the disciplinary is one of them. But like I struggle to remember this actually happened to other incidents. Like for example, Aaron Gillan, the Munster final last year when he struck Cathal Barrett, should that have been a red card, or a retrospective red card? If you start cherry picking all these incidents, why don't you go back and suspend them now? It's kind of, and that's why I think the Clare people are so aggrieved, because they've just picked incidents with no, I suppose, parameters. You know what I mean? There's no reasoning.
Well, the Keen Inch one is the one that jumps out for me, Scal. When you think about the All Ireland final last year, it was like
headlock thing.
The headlock into a judo throw, effectively. So like it's a red card all day long if they're going to decide that, say, it wasn't looked at the time.
Yeah,
that's a nailed on retrospective ban. But again, because it happened in All Ireland final, you just kind of move on, and next season will come around. But like if that was in the Champions League, again, I hate to compare this to other sports, but say if somebody had gone in and judo chopped, Casemiro did that on Mo Salah in the Champions League final, and they ended up retrospectively banning them, he would have missed the first few games of this year's Champions League.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, and like you're right, and that's what I'm saying. Like the likes of soccer, I don't know. Is the reason behind that because the sport we're talking about is professional? Is it because it's soccer, rugby? I don't know. Is it because these panels or these committees are there maybe on a full-time basis, and that the GAA obviously have their own work or their own lives? Maybe that comes into it too. What I will say as well is I don't like people pointing the finger at John Keenan saying that like he's been thrown under the bus somewhat for this. I thought he had a great performance. You know what I mean? And like that'll bring me on to something we might chat later about how is the referee supposed to cope in today's game when you consider the pace at which players are operating and the speed the ball is travelling, like, and still with the same number of officials, with responsibility probably 95% falling on the referee. So that's a far greater discussion in my perspective. Yes, we can talk about the processes for applying suspensions, etc., but we have to give more assistance to referees, or else we'll keep having these situations whereby we have to go trial by media because the ref didn't catch it on the day of the game.
Murph, I'll ask you about the point of John Keenan in a second, but just wondering, Skehill, explain to us what was the straight red card for, because that was club, because in my mind I'm thinking, when did you get a straight red card for Galway? I'm guessing this was a club red card.
I was never sent off for Galway.
Right.
I was only booked a few times. But in
that was for messing with not pucking out the ball and all that kind of stuff.
Just being... Yeah, okay. Let's puck out the ball. Let's leave it at that, right? And the odd bit of mouthing. I hate to admit this now. Christ, Will.
Sorry, no. You opened the floor in this, Skehill, by saying you got a red card.
Yeah, you opened the door and I walked straight to it, didn't I?
Sure did.
It was a club game. Hello, sir. Right, my county teammate. I may have stood them. So and I deserved it. Completely deserved it.
Why Keenan?
Young, dumb, and stupid. Yeah. So I certainly deserved what I got anyway. And ironically, it was Kenning's brother who was the umpire. I looked at him, can you save me? And he just said, I can't. I can't. No, I deserved it. I fully deserved it. Yeah.
And in classic style, the wheels of justice moved slow and you never even had to really serve the ban at all. But there you go. Murph, on the point though about the referee, because this, according to reports, and again, this is what's been reported in the media at the weekend, that this came up tail end of last week in a meeting with the referees, that they discussed that last weekend that maybe some of these incidents weren't dealt with on the pitch, and apparently they were feeling that John Keenan potentially let too much flow last week. Yeah, I thought that was one of the main reasons we were praising him on this very pod for the way that the game had a flow about it and the way that he was kind of consistently applying the rules. And now it would seem that there's a dictate that they're going to have to tighten up for the rest of the championship.
Yeah, and I think that'd be one of the worst moves going if the likes of John Keenan is punished for what happened last weekend. Like, again, we said it last week, and I still stand by what I said anyway, that John Keenan contributed to that match massively. And the thing is, when you let a game flow, there's going to be incidences one way or another. But I suppose the way that they've locked down it so hard, that may be a deterrent for the likes of John Keenan going forward, because obviously he doesn't want to have what is observed as a bad game when the referees committee are looking at it and they're marking him going forward. He had a great game, and I think it's actually one of the performances across the board we've heard by supporters and neutrals and everyone who watched the game said that, you know, the referee contributed to a really good game there. And like, even if you look at like the Kilkenny Galway game, okay, in the time I was getting texts during that game saying that, you know, Richie Reid had been stamped on, and there was nowhere you could see it until after the game that he had been. But like, look, James Owens was reffing that, and you know, some people might say that I'd have every reason not to be a fan of James Owens, but I'd look at that fairly balanced and go, well, look, it happened right in front of the linesmen, but there was a lot happening at the time. It's hard for referees to catch these things, you know, if I'm being very honest about it. And James was kind of alluding to it, you know, before we came on, just about, you know, a bit more help for referees there, because you need someone really, I think, who's removed from the situation. If you want to look at these situations, the referee can catch so much, the linesman can catch so much, but they're all, you know, they all have a lot to be doing. And particularly if we go at the Clare and Limerick game, there was so much happening in that game that for one man, let's say John Keenan in the centre, to catch everything was always going to be impossible. And that game was even an exception really overall, because it was such an intense game. But like, as James was saying, James probably chat a bit more about it there, other sports have these referees, I suppose, who are removed from the game a little bit, that they can see a little bit more, that they also have the benefit of video footage during the game and different things like that. So like, you know, I just think it'd be very hard if we were to look at John Keenan now, a week after one of the best games we've ever seen, and say that John Keenan didn't have a good game. John Keenan, I think, had an excellent game, and these incidents just happened. John Keenan should be afforded more assistance if that's what the GAA want to do, but I would hate to see that he would get some sort of not even a rap on the knuckles, but a mark on his card that says he didn't officiate the game as best he could. I think he did. But like, James, you were saying before that, you know, other sports, how they look at it.
Yeah, like I was trying to equate or compare sports that, let's say, would have the same kind of pace of action, whether it be from a player or a ball. So I picked out three. I picked out the Aussie rules, I picked out American football, I picked out ice hockey. And every one of them have like numerous officials. So the AFL, they have 9 officials. So they have 3 in-game refs and 4 linesmen. And in their rule book, all of them carry equal importance. So they can all make a decision. You know, and then the two goal line lads who do the funny waving with the hands, right? In the NFL, they've got 7 officials. Again, all carry equal importance. They all have the flags they can throw and a play stops. And it's never questioned. Yes, the coach can challenge it once per half, but that's it. And then in ice hockey, there's 4 referees. And in that's a particular one. That's a different one that actually intrigued me a small bit. Of the 4 referees, 2 have a job to watch a particular rule, and the other 2 have a different job. So for example, 2 referees watch goals and fouls, and the other 2 watch, let's say, offsides and icing. So I thought that was very actually a good one that maybe would apply to hurling. Like, do we need a second referee? Absolutely. I think it's actually very difficult to consider. Like, you want a linesman to travel up and down the pitch to cover the ground as fast as the ball travels. That's impossible. So do you get 2 more linesmen and then give them more duty? I don't know. Do you get a second referee and plant them each one inside the 65? I think so. I have no issue with that whatsoever. And I don't think it'll actually breed more fouls. I just think it'll breed better regulation. I just think if you had a referee who was right there on top of the incident with, for example, with Rory Hayes, I think he'd got a red card on the day. And we wouldn't have all this shit talk about trial by media. So again, I go back to my earlier point about the GAA. We have a lot to learn. We do, about our systems and processes. We have a brilliant game. Don't touch the game. Leave the game alone. The game is fine, right? And people who talk about rugbyization, shit talk, right? The game is brilliant. It's the best spectacle, and people crave for that. It's like a gladiatorial kind of thing in the Coliseum when you see it go at it toe to toe like they did last Sunday week. But in terms of officiating and making the game better, this is one avenue we can go down.
Yeah, it's kind of funny as well. I was looking through the comments from last week's YouTube, and naturally, there was lots of discussion about various bits and bobs coming out of the Munster final. But the one thing that everyone seemed to be agreed on was how well John Keenan had ref the game. And like looking at Rachel Godfrey's comment here, as a Limerick supporter, delighted to hear them being recognised for how they carried themselves last Sunday. We were talking about how they didn't react to some of the incidents. They were a tough team, but as Paul Murphy said, not dirty. Agree with Keenan letting the game flow. Yes, there were incidents, but there always will be within a game. The match was so much better for being let flow. And flow was the conversation I think many people had after the game, that there was, a real feeling that kind of finicky fouls weren't being called, and that allowed for an opportunity for the game to actually play out in a manly way, but also in a very entertaining way for supporters. I didn't see anyone after the game saying John Keenan should have called more frees, and I saw very few people who were actually calling for suspensions, even for the instance that we saw in the Sunday game. And that's why I was a little bit surprised when they actually came out with the suspensions on Friday night. But I don't know. I wonder, Murph, if it's going to lead for more calls about looking at video evidence from now on too. Because when one county has been so heavily affected, like I even saw some Clare supporters who were like understandably hurt by the fact that 2 of their main players are out for this coming weekend. They were putting video up, and even I don't like the still shots as opposed to the video, because still shots can give a very unfair representation. But they were having a look at the Flanagan incident where he comes in to try and clean out. Remember the one where Tony Kelly kind of spun and got away with the ball? Yeah. But Shane O'Donnell gets hit. He basically gets barged when there's players going into each other. And they were saying, look, if these incidents are a red card, why aren't they looking at this? And understandably, that kind of whataboutery will come about if there's a feeling that everything that happens and doesn't get picked up by the officials should be looked at.
Yeah, that's it. And I think all these things, again, are heightened if they're looked at after the match. Like, there is definitely a place for looking at these things after a game, because things won't get picked up. But like, if you look at the Leinster game over the weekend, I'm fairly sure the Leinster rugby match, there was an eye gouge in that. And like, the fourth official just obviously radioed to the referee, say, listen, I think we have something here that you might want to take a look at. He looks up at the big screen, he goes, there's an eye gouge there. Opposition player gets sent off, and the people in the stadium see what happened as well. They go, that's an eye gouge. There was no riots at the Leinster game, and again, I'm not saying that's something that we have to bring in tomorrow, but it's certainly rugby seem to have a good way of going at this. And like, I wonder, obviously a good few years ago in the GAA they got rid of in Croke Park replaying fairly contentious issues that might have happened, either different things like this, stamping or headlocks or whatever it's going to be, bad tackles, we'll put it down that way. So it doesn't happen in Croke Park. So again, like, obviously enough, let's say the Leinster final, they didn't show the stamp on Richie Reid in the stadium, but everybody in the crowd pretty much knew, because there was text going around, there was stuff on Twitter, people knew it was happening. Whereas, let's say, and use that as an example, if someone radioed James Owens and said, listen, I think there's something here you might want to have a look at, get it done fairly quick so you don't take the sting out of the game. You deal with it in the moment, and I think supporters rather you deal with it something in the moment than retrospectively, because it could completely change the complexion of a game. Retrospectively, a player stays on the pitch for the full thing. In the moment, if you're showing that's the instant, the player's now off the pitch, it may affect how if the game is won and lost. So I think a debate, or certainly there has to be something opened on this in terms of, could we deal with this better on the day? And if it's dealt with on the day, I think people kind of park it as well. So definitely video evidence to assist a referee, I don't see why it couldn't be considered.
But you know what as well, Murph, and Will, just when we start talking about the officials today, and it reminds me of something, I just think their focus is on the wrong spot. Like, I just have to rewind back to when the Minors, we played Laois there 2 weeks ago in Port Laois. A real hot day, really hot day. And so I'm doing the kind of the Murph, the hurley carrier, right, for the backs in Galway. And so I have the water as well. And the day was roasting. And the linesmen and fourth officials spent more time telling me to get off the pitch with water than they did actually officiate the game, you know. Yeah. And then the week previous, our manager was giving a towel to a player probably 5 yards away. The fourth official comes out to him and says, "You haven't put in a request to the GAA to use that towel." And then our Fergal goes, "Put in a request," so I requested. The fourth official comes back 5 minutes later. Galway's request to use the towel has been denied. Like, and I was just like, when I heard this, I couldn't believe this. Like, this is where the officials' mind space is. Like, the young lad taking a free can use a towel. The young lad on a roasting hot day, and we're talking about welfare and burnout here, I can't go out and give them a drink. Like, I'm not giving them some spruce juice that they're going to run faster. Do you know what I mean? I'm giving them water. Like,
was that not the whole point though, Skehill, when they actually got to the stage where there was only a determined number of people could actually go onto the pitch? So you obviously have your bib on to be one of the Mayor Forna who can actually go out and talk to the players. The whole idea was that there wasn't lads running around and loads of people going onto the pitch. You're actually there as someone who's designated that can go on.
That's right.
If the ball's up the other end, I don't see what there's a big deal with it.
My bib, as I was saying to the fourth official, my bib says, you know, Mayor come on / Ishka.
Yeah.
You know, and the young lads are thirsty. I'm not going to make a young lad. And sorry, my zone or where I'm supposed to be is structured. I can't. That's my specific zone or specific area. So there's a young fella who's the far side of the pitch. I'm not going to make him run over to me to get a drink to run back. So I'm going to run over to him, give the drink, and give the Alicia lads a drink as well. It's not as if I'm giving just the Galway lads, you know, or the Clare lads the week previous. So I just think it just leads on to what you're saying, Murph. The officials on the day, the support officials, their mind is not really focused on the specifics of the real important stuff. Like, forget about a fucking towel and forget about the water. Just watch and officiate the game and let us do the rest. You know?
Right. Let's leave.
Sorry, rant over. Okay, rant over. I have to get that in. Right?
He's going to individually bring back water breaks. That's what's going to happen here by the end of this conversation. We'll park the off the field stuff for the moment. It's probably going to come back up when we talk about Clare being potentially without 2 of their main players for Wexford. But we know that Wexford and Cork have advanced into the knockout stages proper of the All Ireland Championship now after winning their preliminary quarter-finals. Wexford, fairly easy win for them. 21 points in the end, 330 to 18 points away to Kerry. Again, it looks like Wexford have built nicely on that victory against Kilkenny. Was always going to be difficult for Kerry though, on the back of losing the Tailteann Cup, to be back out 7 days later to play again. Antrim gave Cork a good rattle. The final scoreline, which was 327 to 219, is maybe not totally reflective. Antrim, with the wind in the first half, were leading by a point at half time. They had a very contentious penalty given against them, which led to a goal, and then Cork just out-hurled them in the second half. It was a very good second half performance from Cork. So Cork will now play against Galway this coming weekend, and it's Wexford against Clare. Murph, you had GAAGO on, and you were you split screening for this? I watched Antrim and Cork.
Yeah, no, I was split screening away, so I was trying to double job and watch both of them there. But look, the 2 games were played at a marginally different pace. I'll put it that way. You know, Cork and Antrim started off, you know, really intense. There was 4 goals, I think, in the first 20 minutes, and you know, it was a good game, but you could see the conditions were obviously playing a factor. And I think obviously when you saw the second half, like in the first half, let's say, Keelan Malloy popped up with a few points from midfield, which he could do when he was with the wind. But you could actually see that in the second half for them and in the first half for Cork, the ball was just holding up that bit more when you were maybe going from shots from range and dropping short, which in the second half, you know, obviously didn't suit Antrim. Now Antrim went in a point up at half time, and there was good momentum with them, but you know, conditions weren't great. And Cork, in fairness, Cork just seemed to be coming about their scores a little bit easier, in fairness, in that one. And Kerry and Wexford, in fairness to it, for the first 20 minutes there was only a point in it. After 20 minutes, I think Kerry got 4 points on the trot. Podge Boyle popped up with 4 as well. But the Kerry defence actually, you know, held up fairly well. There was a few individual moments of really good defending with Kerry. It's just Wexford just had too much of them, as we would expect, and that's not to be unfair to Kerry. They just had a bit too much for them. But in fairness, there's lots of positive stuff that Kerry can take from this. But again, I suppose it was just going to be a step too far, particularly as well after just coming out of a McDonagh final to go and take on Wexford. So look, they were competitive for quite a bit in the game, but again, Wexford just bridged out the gap in the end. But again, Antrim and Cork, it was a good rattle now, in fairness. It's just Cork were just had a little bit too much for Antrim in the end.
Yeah, probably no harm for Cork either to just get another run out and get a game ahead of playing this quarter final. Be very interesting to see where teams are at. A bit like the football last week, where it was the first time in a decade that all of the provincial finalists were knocked out. So they were coming in off the back of a loss. A lot of their managers had pointed that out, that it's different when a team has got the steam of a win or two behind them before they go into the next game. It's amazing what a difference actually getting a win and getting the winning feeling can actually have. It seemed, Murph, that Lee Chin was kind of at his best in the Wexford Kerry game too. He was popping over a lot of scores. I had the live tracker open for that and I was watching Antrim Cork. So it seems that the Chin has come in, settled things down, and looks like he's going to be their free taker now coming into this game this weekend too.
Yeah, and it was an ideal game for him as well, because he probably had just that extra half a yard in the game where he could find space, and that's kind of what Lee Chin does. As long as he gets on the ball, he's able to create that bit of space for himself, and popping up with a few scores, which again, not saying it builds into his confidence, not saying the man doesn't have confidence at the moment, but certainly once you're popping balls over the bar for a forward, regardless of the circumstances of the match, that's an important thing. And it was ideal as well for Wexford to get him into a game and get him back on frees and get him popping a few balls over the bar. So, in the end of the league, we were talking about where does Lee Chin fit in this. Again, because of the way Wexford have gone over the last while, we see that, he's very important to that forward line, and now he has to be an important part of it and a central figure. And this game, like you said, it was great to get another game for Wexford before going into the Clare game, so that Lee Chin again is playing a bit more with the lads around him. They're getting back into that rhythm again, so it was an important match, and yeah, he was hugely involved for the whole game.
Just on the coverage, Murph, we had a message in on YouTube from Oliver Ryan. He said, "Gents, would love your thoughts on the preliminary quarter-finals been shown on GAAGO only. There was one camera, no other angles or replays or half-time analysis. Feels a shocking reflection on two last 8, and they're in inverted commas, games in a sport that needs publicity." I'll be honest and say I didn't really mind too much, but I'll admit that my viewing experience might be different to others. So I was in the office, I had the phone propped up and I had it on just streaming in front of me, and I wasn't too concerned about how the coverage was with the commentary or with the halftime or whatever else. I was just kind of keeping an eye on the game, and it didn't actually even dawn on me that it was just the one camera tracking left and right, because I kind of expected that was going to be the case. Did it affect you, Murph? Like, I get Oliver's overall point here, though, which is that you're not packaging a last 8 competition in hurling very well by giving it just this kind of bare streaming service by comparison to maybe the TV that some other fixtures would get.
Yeah, I understand what he's saying. It wasn't something I was expecting from the games, I'll be honest. I wasn't expecting to get a big halftime analysis. I was expecting like that before the game. It would just, I suppose, anyone knows who they view it on GAAGO. Quite often it just comes in just before the game starts, depending on the game, obviously. Will come in, you get the game. Most importantly, you get to see the game again. In Cork Park, yeah, there's one camera angle. I was happy enough, again, as long as I got to watch the match. I didn't mind that I got to see both matches. But yeah, look, certainly as he's saying there, maybe there is a bit of scope where you could even just get a bit of on-pitch analysis. I don't think anyone's asking for many replays or anything, but certainly, a bit of pitch-side analysis maybe at half-time going forward. I think maybe they could look at that, but it wasn't something I was expecting, and it wasn't something either I felt hard done by that I didn't get at half-time. I just wanted to see the two matches, and I was happy that there was somewhere I could go and actually watch the matches and be guaranteed that I was going to see them.
Skehill, what did you make? Because it was Wednesday afternoon when it was eventually announced that GAAGO were going to show them, and up until that point it appeared they were going to be not shown and it was going to be an entirely football weekend. Obviously there was a bit of negotiating going on in the background to make sure that these games were on. Look, I was thankful they were shown in the end. It's better late than never when it comes to a decision on it. But in a way it's kind of mad that last 8 contests in the Hurling Championship aren't already earmarked to be on TV.
Yeah, like they should be, I won't say prime slots, but they should at least be given a slot on television. And I can see why Sky and RT didn't show them, because in terms of attractability, I think that the football outweighed the hurling. That's just the way people look at it. And it's well within Sky's rights to not pick the hurling. I just think that RT could have done maybe a bit something, considering that they had the football on the Sunday. That's just my thoughts. But as well as that, like, you look at I suppose the only reason they put it on GAAGO, I think, is because there was a few comments online as to why they weren't in the first place. Then you go back towards the actually championship photograph shoot, and there was no representative from Kerry or Antrim either. That's disgraceful as far as I'm concerned. If you're in the championship, you should be there to launch it. That kind of screams to me like we were on about last week, how there's a little, I don't know if disrespect the right phrase to use, Will. There's nearly like an acceptance on behalf of the GAA that Kerry and Antrim were knocked out, so let's just forget about them and move on to the next 6. So yeah, it is disrespect, but I think it's a lack of grand thinking as well. We're trying to promote these counties, so we should be trying to give them as much airtime, TV time, as much as we can to try and grab as many people in that county as possible. Because even I looked at the crowds, and obviously Cork Park was relatively to capacity, but down in Kerry it was a decent crowd, but not what you'd hope for a prelim quarter final. You know, if the footballers were playing a prelim quarter final, you'd probably get a capacity crowd down there. Again, it's just the nature of what you're up against in that county. But look, the GAA can do an awful lot more. Of course they can. They can do an awful lot more. The coverage of the games on GAAGO was, I suppose, it was acceptable. You know, it was nowhere near what you get on a television game. It was acceptable. So
it was a lot better than Westmeath against Wexford. We'll chat to Derek McNicholas about that a bit later. He admitted he was frustrated. He got home that night, and you score one of the most important goals of your career. Westmeath have got this fantastic result. Feet up, Sunday game. This is going to be great. And next thing you look at it and you can't actually see what's happened.
Yeah,
and
he was pointing out
he was pointing out some lovely scores. You didn't get to see them, and
was even playing. Yeah.
He couldn't believe. And I take this point before we play the interview with Derek a bit later, that he was like, I couldn't understand why RTE didn't just go to the Westmeath stats team, because the Westmeath stats team actually shoot from the far side on a much lower angle on a camera. And they've got a great setup in Cusack Park, because I've been chatting to a few of the guys that do the stuff for their stats. What they actually do after the game is they just plug out the SD card where it's all recorded, and it goes into a kind of an external hard drive which is up in the press box, and it's all downloaded onto a server where the managers can then pull down the video. So if you're, say, part of the Westmeath management team, you could go home and the game is sitting there ready for you to watch. So they could easily have just sent that over to the Sunday game and had really good footage. So at least it was better than that, Skehill.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'd be quite interested to know as well what kind of viewership the two games obtained. And I know it's different because obviously the Sky is subscriptions. That's your own choice, but the RTE is free to air, so the viewership is skewed to a much higher level. But I'd like to know, if possible, I don't know, Kenya, what the two games actually garnered each, and then see was there actually, you know, an appetite to show that in television. It's hard to quantify again, and like these television, you know, the stations, they're all aiming towards broadcasting and viewership, etc., to maximise their own revenue, which I understand when they're paying such large sums for rights, etc. But again, look, I know I sound like I'm repeating myself in a broken record, and I keep saying it, but the teams that like the likes the Antrims, the Kerrys, the Westmeaths, they need support, and not just financial support, but they need actual support, GAA support to get these games exposed and get a bit of traction. And like, because you'd see, obviously Kerry and Antrim, they both made mistakes. They both made mistakes that you'd expect of a team who just after coming out of a Joe McDonagh, they just played a championship, you could say, that was to a level that was sufficient to get them through. And then they come up to Liam McCarthy, so they need more exposure. So that's why I will still champion the fact that Kerry should be in Munster, and I keep saying it. And Antrim should maintain in Leinster. We should do more to include the Antrims and the Leashers, etc. Yeah,
I think the minute Kerry win the Joe McDonagh, let them up. Just get rid of the playoff. Just get rid of it and let Kerry in for a season and see how two groups of 6 work. It can be as easy as that, and we'll see if they can get to a 4th consecutive final next year. Excuse me. Some of the questions that we have in from the Instagram, which thankfully we have back. Thank you, Meta, for getting us back on the Instagram at the tail end of the week, so we're able to throw up the old stick in a question for Skehill and Murphy last night, and there's plenty of them coming in. So this gives us a roundabout way of even talking about the games from last weekend and heading to this weekend. So you can have first shout in this one, Murph. So Evan Ahern, who's a regular Instagram messenger to us for the show, is Conor Lehane the All-Star 12 for this season? He's got 19 points from play so far this year.
Yeah, well, I think he has stiff competition from Shane O'Donnell at the moment. It's a tough one. Shane O'Donnell is obviously the GPA player of the month at the moment. But like, Lehane is flying it. And again, we picked our top 5 players a few weeks ago. I traded Shane O'Donnell for Lehane. Probably felt a bit bad an hour after recording the podcast because it's such a hard decision. But look, I suppose to answer it in a way, like, we all know the way the All-Stars work. Like, I mean, if Shane O'Donnell and Conor Lehane play well enough, both of them will be in the team. Okay, one of them won't be at number 12, but the other will be somewhere else. But Conor Lehane, definitely, yeah, it has to be between the two of them at the moment. It's so hard to call between both of them. Would the All-Star committee, the way I'm looking at it now, would the All-Star committee pick him over Shane O'Donnell at the moment? Probably not. I'd say Shane O'Donnell just tips it at the moment. And again, didn't light it up necessarily against Limerick, but you know, obviously a very tough match. But certainly there's a lot of people that would agree with him, that Conor Lehane is probably the All-Star number 12 at the moment. But I don't know, the best way to answer that is, look, if both of them stay hurling the way they're hurling, both of them will probably be in an All-Star team, and they'll fit them in somewhere. So if he is hoping for Conor Lehane to be in there, they'll fit him in if he hurls well enough.
Which is the classic one, and probably what will happen, depending of course on the results over this weekend and what happens in the semi-final and the final. But if you're sitting down in an All-Star committee right now, what could easily happen would be Tony Kelly gets selected in midfield, which allows you to get an extra forward into the 6, and then you could easily pick Lehane out of position on the other wing or in 11, and then you put O'Donnell in, or you move O'Donnell to centre half forward, or you do something like that to jig to get them in. It's happened so many times over the years where you get players who didn't even play in midfield and get picked there just so you can get an extra forward in. It's I don't know. There's part of me that loves the tradition of actually having to make the hard call. And if you were sitting down in a group, Murph, and you had to go, you can have O'Donnell or Lehane, and you're going to have to face the consequence of leaving one of them out.
Yeah, I prefer it that way as well. I just think, look, unfortunately, if 3 lads play well at left half forward, and then, you know, and that's it, but they don't really play anywhere else, grand. You pick them they're wearing 12 on their back for the whole year. Pick one of them, and unfortunately the other 2 lads just lose out. But I'd rather that sort of a system and just make the hard calls. Like you're saying, if a lad is holding the fort at centre forward, you know, let's say you have a Bonner Mar at centre forward who's doing hard work and he was the best centre forward all year, but then you're there going, you know, Jesus, I want to get Joe Canning was playing full forward all year, but I want to get him into the team, and then Bonner Mar loses out at centre forward. You know, just using hypothetically 2 players. I'm not a fan of that system. I just think, you know, make the hard call. You're on the All-Star committee, make the hard call based on the players who played in the positions.
Okay, well, it's Galway and Cork this weekend, Skehill, and there's plenty of feedback about Galway, so you can address all of it here that came in on the YouTube for last week. This maybe get the temperature that's been in Galway since the Leinster final. So Sinead McLaughlin on the YouTube, very simple. No hope for Galway after that performance. Dreadful. Left hand on top was in contact. Slightly more nuanced, so I'll read this one out to you. Particularly like the fact that Paul apparently is very good and balanced. Don't know what that says about Skehill, but there you go. I do agree Owens' poor ref gave Kilkenny a few soft frees at the end, but then gets into Galway. So Galway could possibly have had Cooney, Fahy, Flynn all dismissed, and Cohen. Maybe if they had a lad sent off, it might have been a kick up the behind that they needed during the game. Galway were rash, I thought, and they were nearly too interested in silly tackles. I thought with the few winning minor teams we have, there'd be a few more fresh faces on the Galway team, but I know it takes time. Sad and disappointing to see this going on with the handshake. I know a lot of Kilkenny people were disappointed with this going on. Cody knew the spotlight was on him, and all it took was a quick handshake and move on. And then Shane Leonard was also in contact, said loves the podcast, always good to hear. I'm a Galway man, and I'm going to be totally honest. There were too many passengers on the Galway team. Quite simple, centre back is a problem position. McInerney has not played well since 2017, so keep that part in your mind first, Skehill. You can come back to that. There are players still playing today that were playing 12 years ago. Monaghan should have been taken off after 20 minutes. We only had Conor Whelan up front performing against KK. Cathal Mannion, one of our most gifted forwards in the half back line, needs to go back to the forwards. Joe Cooney, arguably the best half back in the county, should be at number 6. Wholesale changes are needed. Also, Henry should have 2 outside selectors with him. So a lot to unpack in Shane's comment there particularly. Let's go back to McInerney. McInerney hasn't played well since the All-Ireland apparently.
You're after throwing an awful lot of media there now.
I know, but we can go one after another here, Skehill. This is the joy of a podcast. Right, you can address all these comments.
I'll answer a section, you give me the next part, because I've forgotten an awful lot of stuff.
McInerney has not played well since 2017.
So Mac had a standout year in 2017 and was actually given Sunday Game Hurler of the Year that year. So like if you're comparing that, I know some players that they reproduce that form every single year, but you're talking about generation greats, right? And Mac had a standout year in 2017. He hasn't reached the form of 2017. Fair enough, right? The man hasn't been cleaned. He hasn't been out-muscled. He hasn't been the cause of our defeats. You know, people aren't running down his channel. So I don't really buy that that Mac is not, you know, the player of he was. Look, he didn't produce the performance he did, but still he's a fulcrum of that defence. And if the age-old question I'll ask these people, and I love saying to them when they ask me in person, this lad is playing, but right, I'll check him out. So who do you put in? So we take out Mac out of 6. Tell me who you put in. And they'll say that man just said, bring back Joseph Cooney. Fair enough, bring back Joseph Cooney. Who do you put in the forwards then? You know, like, it's not as if we've an embarrassment to riches. You know, we don't have that. We don't have a situation like you have in Limerick where they have multiple all-stars. They're blessed with a certain core group at the minute that they can rejig their whole defence and their forwards and they don't miss a beat. Unfortunately, in Galway's situation, we just don't have that, right? So the clientele we have in these positions, we just need to stick with them. And to address another point about the minors, actually I didn't remember a good bit of this about the minors.
Most of it, you're doing well. I'm reading back here at the same time going, not bad. I
think in fairness we did miss minors. Notoriously in Galway we always have the most skillful hurlers. Like in terms of skill base we'll be up there with everyone, but it's just we're missing a trick in our conditioning. So like we've lost a couple of guys over the last couple of years that say for some reason that they came through the 20 grades just weren't physically ready to step up to senior. And it's a different grade nowadays. Like it's not like it was where you get away on just complete ability. It's ability plus strength plus conditioning plus even maturity. And I think a small part to play of this too was changing the minor to 17s and change 21s 20s. For some reason I have this belief that like I came out of school at 17, went into college straight away. An awful lot of kids nowadays are coming out at 19, and I think maybe cognitively they're small, but they lack a bit of maturity and they lack a bit of, you know, grown upness, if you want to call it that. So it's taken them a bit longer to get to the the pitch of senior hurling or the pitch of even life to deal with it all. So I just think that's all contributed to it. Whereby when you go to 21, they move into it a bit sooner. They move up a different grade, a higher level of S&C. They've moved on to college, etc. And they're more prepped for senior. So I just think again we should go back to minor at 18 and twins at 21, but that's a different story. And then with regards to the performance, it's dreadful. Yeah, it was a dreadful performance. We did some good things. We did an awful lot of bad things as well. Don't get me wrong. Systematically, we need to change things. We just need to. I know it's easy for me to say, park all of that. Just park it all, because it doesn't do you any good right now. All you have to do is focus on Cork, focus on how to take them down. If I was the manager of Galway and the players, I would probably put maybe 10% of my energy into Cork and put 90% into Galway, and just go, what are we going to do? And forget about them, and just put your, excuse the pun, put your foot on the gas from the word go, let's say, right? I couldn't think about it else. I couldn't think about it else, right? Put your foot on the gas from the off and implement your game plan straight away, and be proactive in that sense.
Do not stamp your foot, kids.
It's like Grain Muldowell are saying execute during the week now. Just one word you're not meant to say. You just said it.
That is a comparison.
What is it, 15 podcasts? What are we on this week now, Will? And
17.
He's never used that term, foot on the gas. So, yeah, bad week.
Maybe it was on purpose.
Send that to the CCCC now.
The only bit that you didn't address, you remembered nearly all of it, was this idea that Carl Mannion should be moving back up, and that then put Joe Cooney into 6.
Yeah, so Carl Mannion is an extremely intelligent hurler. And he's athletically gifted in terms of pace and fitness. His skill work is fantastic. So like when I'm listening out his attributes, I'm comparing him, I'm thinking, geez, like in my mind, and I know it's hard compared to him this year because they haven't reached the heights, but he's got all the attributes of a Tony Kelly, a Keane Lynch, right? Hear me out now. Now, he hasn't got to the heights of Tony Kelly, and he hasn't probably got to the big game, I suppose, production that Tony Kelly's got to. But he's got all the attributes of those. And every time I see Keane Lynch play or Tony Kelly play, it's like I struggle to pinpoint where their position is. Like Tony Kelly, as I said, picked up ball and he's 5 and he's 12, he's 10, he's all over the place, you know what I mean? And it's like he's given a license to roam where he feels he's most productive. I would do the same with Cahill. I would just say, Cahill, go where you want, because he's a smart guy. Get on the ball and just look for him. I feel like Clare look for Tony Kelly all the time. And when they put a puck out down in a certain direction, I feel like Tony Kelly is arriving. He's arriving when that ball is landing, because he's timed it himself. He's not overly structured. So that's the kind of license. I wouldn't dare put Cahill Mannion in corner forward. I just wouldn't, because we don't get the full production of him. I would let him out around the middle third and say, do what you want, but do whatever you want and just go where you are, because he does it for his club, and he causes havoc for the club because you don't know where he's going to be, and he's impossible to mark. And again, like, he's so important to Galway that if we're going to beat Cork, like if we beat Cork, I guarantee you one of the top 3 performers, if not the best performer, will come from Cahill Mannion. If he's not in the top 3 performers, we're going to struggle against Cork.
All right, let's talk about Cork and Galway then, Murph, because last week Cork made the decision to bench Patrick Horgan, and this has been discussed so many times. It's almost been discussed as much as, is he breaking the record this week, is he not breaking the record, where we've had plenty of people message us saying maybe the best thing to do is Cork hurl better without Horgan, have him on as an impact player to come in and he'll settle the ship, and he's an incredibly dangerous player. Kingston made the decision last week to put him on the bench. How do you think Cork operated without him starting?
Well, they hurled well in fairness, and Tim O'Mahony was inside in the corner forward position and basically set up the goal. He won the ball, brought it through, took a heap of tackles, and it's something that we're seeing that Tim O'Mahony provides to that forward line. Like, he makes the ball stick when it goes in, and just Kieran Kingston has had to make a lot of tough decisions, no more than not playing Shane Kingston at different times, and so he has to make hard decisions. But look, I don't know, like, none of us see what happens behind closed doors when Cork are training, but to me what it's just saying is that, in fairness to Kieran Kingston, I would say he's picking what he sees is the best team in training, which, if any manager is doing that, you have to give him great respect, because it's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to say. Patrick Horgan will put over the freeze all day, and that's an important thing for a team to be able to do. But if Kieran Kingston looks at it and goes, well, do you know what? Maybe we have enough lads like Conor Lehan and Seamus Harnedy and Alan Connolly really going well, that maybe we need someone in there who makes the ball stick and is maybe a little bit more unorthodox than Tim O'Mahony, and is a bit more physical as well in terms of getting in, it's basically putting a defender on a defender, So he seems to have kind of made this call, and the results were evident as well. In fairness, like I said, for the goal, ball came in, Tim O'Mahony won it, took a few tackles, and then kind of just shunted it on. And we saw the impact he had in the Waterford match as well. So what I would say about this is Kieran Kingston is obviously going, right, keeping this open-minded, reputation's out the window. I'm gonna play the best team that I see in front of me, and that's what he has to do. And I think all things considered, if you have a manager that's doing that, like that's a serious quality to have in a manager. So there's nothing to say the next day Patrick Horgan won't be starting, because Patrick Horgan hasn't shown anything to say that he's completely off the boil and that he's not hurling well. He could very well be starting the next day, but I think Kieran Kingston has kind of learned from every lesson he's had this year or maybe the last few years, is constantly trying to adapt, and he's learned something that maybe Tim O'Mahony makes this forward line tick a little bit more at the moment. And you know what, and far be it for me to say that Patrick Horgan maybe coming off the bench, or maybe spending, let's say, the Antrim game on the bench, and he's savage hunger in him this week, mightn't light a small bit more of a fire and get his game back going. Because I think if you're a competitive player and you're a competitor and you want to develop, you're always I suppose willing to try and get that hunger back going again. And sometimes maybe not starting a game is enough to get that hunger going again. So look, all I'll say is fair play to Kieran Kingston. Tough call to make, but I think he's just shown a lot of integrity and sticking behind his decisions.
Yeah, it's a huge call to decide not to put the top championship scorer of all time on the pitch against Galway in a quarter-final this weekend, though. Skehill, a few weeks ago, our buddies over at No Plan B GAA on Twitter had stuck up the work rate of the Cork forwards, and you could see that, like, when it comes to turnovers and when it was coming to just metres, covered, Horgan was lower than some of the other players on the team, and therefore when you've got players coming in that are maybe going to work harder as a unit, that potentially is a reason why Cork's form has improved over the last few games. I'm not saying for a moment, by the way, that Horgan had anything to do with the slow starts in the first two games, but if you've got all these stats and you're on the management team with Cork right now, you got to be looking at it and saying, right, we've brought these guys in, we've changed our forward pack around a little bit, and it's worked. Like, the performances are much better now than they were in the first two games.
Yeah, and I think Kieran Kingston's brief, first and foremost, to do what's best for the team and for Cork. So he's to put any kind of personal relation or even, statistics behind and just do what's best for Cork. And I think when you understand why Patrick Horgan is the all-time leading championship top scorer, is because he's a shooter. And get the ball to him, he'll shoot, he'll score. Like, Bonner Maher is not the all-time championship scorer, but I'd say if you look up there in terms of tackle ratio and hooks and blocks for the time he's in it, like, he's probably charts were his statistics for that element was probably off the charts. So like, every team has a balance. Every forward unit has a balance. You have your workers, you have your shooters, and you've got your hybrids, the guys who do both. So I think I think it's the nature of the beast, and where Cork found themselves at the start of the year, they found themselves found wanting for a battle up front, especially taking the bull by the horns, you could say, against teams like Limerick and especially against Limerick, you could say, and maybe just Patrick was sacrificed, and this had to be trialled. So I think if you're looking at teams, and every team nowadays operates off numbers, statistics, possession retention rate, possessions lost, etc. And if the statistics are showing that a particular chart in the zone, or a particular area on the heat map is the ball coming from there, or that the forward unit is breaking down, letting out too much ball, you have to do something different. You just need to do something different to change it up and see how it works. And in fairness to Cork, they've changed it up, and I do think, and we'll touch on it in a while, the introduction of Alan Connolly has changed them a bit. I know he came on against Clare, and actually the whole thing seems to have changed a bit for Cork. That's just the way I feel. Like, him at 14 or across the full forward line, he just seems to have added a bit of oomph about him. A bit of aggression and a bit of finishing power, exactly, as well. But he can also do the work. So I will. If you were to ask me the question, is Patrick Horgan going to start against Galway? I'd have to say yes, he will. Would I be delighted if he was off? I'd say yes. I'd be delighted if he's off. Because again, he's a shooter. Get your best shooter off the pitch. I'll take that all day long. And trying to trade that for a work rate unit. Again, it's we don't know what's going on in Cork. Maybe he even saved the player for himself. Maybe he's carrying a bit of a nickel. I haven't a clue. But I just struggle to think of a world where Cork were playing and Patrick Horgan's not at 15.
I like that there's two takeaways from that. One, I didn't even have to ask you the question about whether he should start this weekend, which would have been my natural next question. You just knew. And secondly, I'm loving the love that Bonner Maher is getting on this chat this week. He's been injured so much over the last couple of years, but still, he's getting love from both Murphy and Skehill on the pod this week.
Absolutely.
Murph, how do you see the game going then? I mean, this one to me is very, very hard to call, because a few weeks ago, I would have thought Galway look in a better position than Cork. Cork have put in 2 or 3 good performances now in a row, and there's plenty of question marks about Galway coming out of the Leinster final. Now, that's not to say that Galway can't turn it around. We've seen 1 week turnarounds with Wexford this year against Kilkenny. There's no guarantee that Galway will be as bad as they were in the Leinster final, and there's no guarantee that Cork are going to be as good as they were in the last 2 games in Munster.
Yeah, and I'd agree. Like, just something I was thinking about there when obviously James was feeling the whole Galway situation. Like, it's one game, is the way I'm looking at it. Like, we were here 2 weeks ago talking about Kilkenny being flat after the Wexford game, going in against Galway, probably going to be bet by 5 or 6 in terms of that was the narrative out there. Some people were saying, Galway are favourites here and so on. After one game now, we're not talking about Kilkenny this week or Antrim. They're in All-Ireland semi-final. And kind of, suddenly everybody is an expert as to where Galway are going wrong. Galway were one of the most consistent teams this year, up until one game. And even, Henry said it after the game of it's very hard to put your finger on where it went wrong. Sometimes that just happens, but you definitely don't overhaul the whole thing by doing that. Cathal Mannion was out. Yeah, he was around the half back line. Mikey Butler went to follow him, but they put him back in, the full forward line after about 30 minutes, I'd say, and went back that direction as well. Galway just didn't take on the day, and that was it. What way do I see it going against Cork? I think Cork will come into this game. Obviously, they're in a good place at the moment, and maybe they're thinking, listen, Galway are after coming off, a Leinster final where they were flat and maybe have a few questions. Let's not give them time to answer those questions. Let's hit the ground running here and throw absolutely everything at them. From Galway's point of view, I think I'm potentially thinking the likes of Davy Burke might come into it. Now, I don't know if Davy Burke is carrying a niggle or anything, but when he came on the last day, you could see the fire in him. You could see that he was there. He was getting involved. There was Kilkenny. Paddy Deegan went down with an injury at some stage. He was grabbing him by the jersey and trying to pick him up off the ground, kind of Andy Smith style back in around 2012 or that. Like, just getting involved, Maybe that was something Galway were missing in the last game. So I think the likes of Kilkenny brought in Conor Fogarty last day, a reliable player, will break up play, get on the ball, won't fear anyone. I think Galway the next day will potentially bring in Davy Burke into the middle of the field and reintroduce that kind of hardy player into the middle, a reliable player who will, I suppose, run as long as he can on the pitch, and you might take him off after 45 or 50 minutes. But I think that's what Galway you might see them going back to. I'd have no fear over Gearóid McInerney at centre back, and behind him one of the best defenders there's been in Daithí Burke. So really, look, I think the way I see the game going, Cork are going to hit the ground running from the start. Galway will have questions to answer, and there won't be time for Galway to, I suppose, to ease themselves into this game. But would I write off Galway? Absolutely not. I give Galway a huge chance in this game because the potential with Cork over the last few years has been that when they go into a game as favourites, they sometimes maybe take their eye off the ball a small bit. If they take their eye off the ball a small bit, aren't at the pitch of the game, and you leave that door open for Galway could come out of traps at 100 miles an hour, and before you know it, Conor Whelan's after hanging the ball up in the net, you're a little bit rattled, you're on the back foot, and now you're suddenly the team that's fighting against the game getting away from you. So what I would say overall with this one, it's a lot. I know Cork are probably the favourites going into this off the back of the Leinster final, but I think Galway have a huge chance in this game. And I think if Galway come out and in the first 10-15 minutes rattle Cork, which I think they're well capable of doing, and I think Henry will have them ready for that, well then suddenly it's a completely different game. And if Galway come out of this game winning it, we're going into an All-Ireland semi-final where people are going, brilliant, this is a Galway team that can challenge Limerick, that can challenge whoever comes in front of them. And I think that's the way we're talking. So I wouldn't get too carried away with the one game Galway had. I think this game is a lot tighter, and I think, like I said, if Galway ask questions of Cork, it could be a tough day for Cork. But look, Cork are in a good position, and it's a little bit in their hands at the moment as to what they bring.
Yeah, be prepared, both of you, by the way, for Cork supporters who probably midway through the Munster Championship are going to say Skehill and Murphy wrote us off earlier this year, and here we are now back in an All-Ireland semi-finals. Just be prepared for that.
Quarter-final as well. Let's not get carried away. Quarter-final.
Well, if they win. If they win, it'll be next week they'll come to you. If they get knocked out in a quarter-final, you probably won't hear a whole lot from them. Particularly Skehill won't hear anything if Galway have beaten them. But
they'll hear from me.
Yeah, there you go. It'll be Skehill getting the Twitter machine ready at the weekend at full time. He'll have his draft ready. But when it comes to your confidence in Galway now, Skehill, into this weekend, has it been shaken anywhat by Croke Park last week, or are you still confident that Galway can brush that to one side and put in a big show against Cork and Thurles?
This actually sounds a bit strange because when I was coming into the Leinster final, like, I know we came through round robin, but that was still kind of round robins can be treated a bit of shadow boxing. You don't really get a true test. It's not really a true knockout game, and I know the Leinster final wasn't either. However, I was a bit nervous with Kilkenny because I know what they bring, and I was saying, Jesus, will we be up for the fight? That's the question I had. Will we be up for the fight? And it transpired we were up for the fight, we weren't up for a smart fight. So I'm thinking this week now that our analysis team have had 2 weeks to review the Kilkenny game. Regardless of opposition, they'll have looked at our own puck out, looked at our own tackling and said, right, we need to tailor our sessions to suit, which I think they've done. And I'd say then they're going to come out all guns blazing. So I'm expecting, I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, but I'm telling you what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a ferociously physical Galway, which I think they'll bring. I'm expecting them to put the shackles on Conor Lehan, or should I say try put the shackles on Conor Lehan via a Pádraig Mannion or a Darren Morrissey. And I'm expecting them to go, again, full court press from the corner forward position back. So that's what I'm a bit more, I suppose, confident. I'm a bit more encouraged by what we saw against Kilkenny. Let's say that they've had time to review it. Yes, they got that bad performance out of their way. They've had time to analyse it and now try to fix it. So I'm looking forward to Saturday. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to bring, because they've been forewarned. I'll put it that way to you. They've been bloody well forewarned against Kilkenny, and if they show up the way they did against Kilkenny, they'll be out the gate again, and I'll be having my tail between my legs after ranking them number 3 a couple of weeks back. But again, I'm as a Galway man, I'm expecting and I'm hoping they come out how I think they will, which is all guns blazing, and hit them as hard as they can.
What I'll just throw in on that now as well. Sorry, just to say, like, I think there's two ways you could enter this, and I think the way the Galway are entering at this moment is they would be disappointed, the players, how they performed in the Leinster final. And there's two different ways they could have lost that match. One, they could have performed really, really well and still lost the match, and you're kind of questioning yourself after, going, geez, do we have any more? Like, I mean, we performed really well, but we didn't win. But they just didn't perform on the day. So, like, the autopsy afterwards will be that we didn't perform well. Henry will be saying to the boys, listen lads, we're going to have 15 players the next day. It's up to you to grab a jersey, and the 15 players that are going out are going to be the lads who work really hard and are going to do a job for us in the next game. Whenever they name that team on Thursday or Friday night before the game, the 15 lads who get the jerseys are going to be absolutely, first of all, delighted, but they're going to be determined that, you know, I'm not going to let down the side. I'm going to perform. I'm not going to let it be a situation of what happened in the Leinster final. And that's why I'm thinking that Galway are actually going to explode into this game, because the 15 players who get the jersey are going to want to rectify what happened in the Leinster final, and are going to be, you know, full of hunger, full of aggression. And that's why I see Galway bursting out of the traps. So if Galway had actually hurled savagely well against Kilkenny and lost, I think they'd be going into this with a little bit of dent in the confidence and a little bit unsure. But they're not. They're disappointed at the moment how they performed the Leinster final. So I actually think they're going to come out and say, well, let's show all the lads who doubted us what we're about. And that's why I think it's really dangerous for Cork, because I just think, like, I wouldn't like to have Daithí Burke's back up, Gerard McInerney's back up, Conor Whelan. I wouldn't like them lads going out angry, because, and again, like I said, I think Davy Burke will be involved. I think it's made for Galway to go out here and quieten a lot of people if they hurl, and that's where I think Galway are coming from.
I promise, by the way, I'm not on commission from No Plan B GA, the GA performance process as they are called on Twitter, but they reacted to something Skehill was talking about on the podcast last week about Galway's slow puck out and the retention rate on the puck out. Look, it's nice to get the stats to back up what Skehill was talking about. So Galway 30 puck outs against Kilkenny. They only won 16 of them, so it was a win rate of 53%. But perhaps more crucially, when they went into Kilkenny's half, Galway only won 9 of the 23 long puckouts that they hit. So they retained the ones within their own half. But crucially as well, Kilkenny, when they pushed up on that Galway puckout and caused some hassle, Kilkenny managed to get 7 shots directly from Galway puckouts coming to their players, and they scored 4 points from it. So again, that just goes to show, Skehill, the puckout has to improve this week.
It has to, because it was overly structured the week previous in the Leinster final, so you could actually read it. And I'd say, Murph, if you were in the Kilkenny defence that day, you look at it and you nearly know where the puck was coming, and you can structure your defence accordingly. What we want, if I'm training a team, and say I want a defence to be on the back foot, I want it to be guessing the whole time, and I want to give them as little amount of time to react to something we're doing to them. And what happens in that game was Kilkenny had loads of time. They knew where the ball was coming, they set themselves up, they were in the positions where they wanted to be, and they were first on arrival. That was the big thing. And I couldn't understand, watching the game live, why our midfielders were so deep towards their own goal and they were second on arrival. The Kilkenny midfielders were arriving first. So that's just a recipe for disaster, because you're going to lose at least 2/3 of the ball in front of you all the time. And if you've a guy who's first on arrival and he's in black and amber jersey, it's coming straight back to you again, down to your own defence. So the puck out has to be fixed. You get the numbers there. You said 30 puck outs.
I just counted dots here, Skehill, as well, perhaps even more crucially, right? So on the left-hand side, and there was one who went out over the sideline, but the others were generally dropped into what would be the left wing forward position, generally, is probably the fair way of putting it, right? So when the ball dropped over there, 18 went over to that side, if you want to call that like a third of the pitch. That is no variety about it at all. Like, there's the right wing back position, the right side of midfield, pretty much no puckouts went there whatsoever. So Kilkenny had to know that the overload was coming on that side every time.
And it goes off the time as well. So I could see the goalie, because I do it myself. Like, you go through your phases, your progression phase, you see who's first open. And if you look down the pitch straight away as far as you can I get a man down as far as I can the pitch, and you work your way back as fast as you can. You work your way back, And I can see Aina doing that, and the next thing it stops. And when you get past the 7-8 seconds mark, you know then it's going to 12. You know, and that's a killer. That's an absolute killer. So like I can watch the game and look at Aina, he's going right, nothing in the half forward line, nothing in midfield, nothing in the half back line. Shit, okay, let's go to 12.
Does that become the kind of percentage puck out then, Skehill? That's your kind of, right, I've no other options, so I'm going to lump at that end and hope that we win something.
I think so. I'd say it's a question of clientele too. I'd say he's probably looking at Joseph Cooney and Conor Cooney and say, hey, skip over there, lads, and Keane Fahy, our three biggest players you could say in the forward unit. I don't think he's going to go down with a high one on top of Tom Monaghan unless he's got a few yards of space in front of him. I don't think he's going to go short to midfield because that's generally crowded out by the opposition half forward line. He doesn't have the distance to go above the half back line or beyond them, should I say. So it's like that your default ball is to 12. The way you counteract that is everyone switches on from the second the ball goes dead, you switch on, look for it. You engage every Kilkenny lad and you get the ball out within 6-7 seconds. Very easy for me to sit here in the podcast and say that. But trust me, in practice it's very difficult when you come up against a team the quality of Kilkenny who set themselves. Kilkenny are probably the best at it in terms of over the years of position themselves in such a perfect position that you can't get shots off and they're forced to go long. Limerick are excellent at the moment too. So it's not a simple fix, but it just needs variety is a thing. So you have to be a Cork defender and you have to be as confused as possible. You know what I mean? And you have to have as little time to react as possible and create a situation on Saturday like was created when Limerick played them in the Ireland final last year. They didn't know where to go, the Cork backs, and it just opened up gap after gap after gap and sucked the life out of them early. That's what Galway have to replicate.
Okay, so that's the first game of two at Semple Stadium on Saturday, 1:45 throw-in. It's followed at 4:15 by Clare against Wexford. This one's intriguing, Murph, because right now we have to assume that Duggan and Hayes are not available because we don't know what's going to happen with the appeal later in the week. So anyone who's listening, this is going out Monday at 7 p.m. and the YouTube is going out Tuesday at 10. We don't know at this stage whether there's going to be any change in the situation. Assuming that the two of them are missing, how much of a golden opportunity does this become for Wexford?
Yeah, it does become a good opportunity in terms of it's definitely leaning towards Wexford a bit more now, but I still think Clare are in a much better place again. Not after this. I mean, they're still in a better place than Wexford. I think there's a savage siege mentality happening in the Clare panel, probably rightfully so in many ways. As in they just seem to get dealt what in their camp would be perceived as raw deals. Certainly for them looking outwards, going, we seem to get very little breaks in terms of what's happening off the pitch. And I think, look, Clare are just. We talked about momentum, and it's something I've mentioned a few weeks there. Just Clare have this momentum at the moment, and I think they have their crosshairs set on an All-Ireland semi-final at the moment. They hadn't had time to think really after the Munster final. They're just going back, facing into this game, and I think they were just going to keep the momentum up. I think they still have enough to beat Wexford, because again, Wexford's system is really good at the moment, as in it's coming back. What we saw against Kilkenny was good, but that's if you play into it. I don't think Clare are going to play into that system. They're brilliant at carrying the ball. They're going to be playing through Tony Kelly, who's going to be running mad angles around the pitch. So if they drop back a sweeper, that doesn't really matter because Tony Kelly is still going to be running around popping up with his few scores. And I think what Brian Lohan will be saying to the players this week now is, look, we're not going to get any favours here. We're not going to get any turns. I'm not saying that Brian Lohan is down there saying everyone's out to get us, but certainly the players will be savage to get into an All-Ireland semi-final. And, as we're saying, we don't know if Rory Hayes or Peter Duggan are back on for them this weekend, but they'll be saying to get those lads into an All-Ireland semi-final. And whatever players, I think to do with the players to come in and replace them, that'll do a job, because Clare's system at the moment is really good. It just seems to be that every player seems to understand what their job is, and more importantly, if you're replacing that with another player, that player knows what to do. The player knows the role of the left half forward or the right half back, and that just seems to be savage work rate and work the ball up the pitch. So I still think Clare for this one, for me, are favourites. And the two reasons I'd say it is they have momentum, and Wexford are kind of relying heavily enough on their system at the moment in the hope that a team will knock down long balls on them and that they'll work it out. Clare don't do that. Clare work the ball up really well as far as midfield, half forward, and start popping over scores from there. So for me at the moment, momentum is still with Clare, and even without Peter Duggan and Rory Hayes, I still think they have too much for Wexford.
In a way, Skehill, it's an easy team talk for Clare, because you turn around and you say, everyone's out to get us. That's why the two lads aren't playing. So you guys are going to have to go out there and stick it to everybody. And then on top of that, if you're Brian Lohan, you're probably saying, Championship this year, we have not been beaten inside 70 minutes. Let's go back and try and get another shot at Limerick again.
Yeah, he's trying to find the right balance of focusing on the positives. And the positives is exactly what Murph says, that they've momentum, and they've momentum for the right reasons, because they're all on the same page. They're producing good performances. again, the cynic can look on Tony Kelly and say he's carrying them. I don't buy that. I think it's a good balance. Like they defend well, their keeper's good. You know, they create an awful lot up front themselves. Like, so they've kind of everything going for them really. And the only negative they have is they haven't beat Limerick. That's all. You know, but everything else is looking good for them. And in Lohan, like, who of all people you want to develop a siege mentality and develop a follow me attitude, to Lohan. Like, that's the way he played. Like I've said in the podcast numerous times, the way he played full back was always of the inspirational kind. That he was just coming, man, ball and all, and if you were in the way, you were getting out of the way. That's the size of it. And I get the feeling that even when I went down to look at the Clare Waterford game, when you're talking to some supporters and even the Clare FM people, it's like that he has them all where he wants them. He has the players where he wants them, the board, Club Clare, the supporters club, and the players, and they're all coming behind him, and he's leading the way. So I can imagine in the dressing room now, and he's creating the exact same speech as you're after mentioning there, with a couple of notes that these people are all against us and let's just blow everyone out of the way, us against them. And that might play right into them. I think that the way Clare's year has gone so far, and the way even you look at social media and the way their supporters are behind the team, that'll all create a lovely little hysteria for the game at the weekend. And I think Wexford, like, they're going to be stern opposition, that's for sure, but like Clare, I think, have this feel that the train is rolling, everyone hop on, and if you're in the way, you're going to get blown out of the way. And I expect Clare, I might swallow my words come Monday morning, but I do expect Clare to win by 6 or 7.
Okay, well, Clare have had a good record in recent years against Wexford, and another kind of small factor on it here is that Clare have played regularly at Semple Stadium this summer, so the venue should well suit them going back there again. Well, Wexford haven't had as much game time in there at all. Just a few kind of Instagram comments around this game, which will give us a way of talking around it too. Michael O'Leary was saying, Murph, on Instagram, if Wexford were to beat Clare, are they the type of team that could stick it to Limerick in the final? He reckons Wexford will beat Kilkenny in the semi-final. Now, park that bit to one side, right, because that's only going to cause controversy. But if Wexford were to beat Clare, and you give me an argument here for Wexford beating Clare even, do you think Wexford are a team that could give Limerick a good run in a semi-final?
No, I don't think so, to be honest. Like, Wexford, they could beat Clare, but like, I know it sounds nearly contradictory to say it. Like, yeah, they could potentially go out and maybe beat Clare, but they couldn't beat Limerick. I know lads will say, well, sure, Jesus, Clare, stuck it to Limerick in 70 minutes. But
Wexford beat Limerick in the league.
Yeah.
Way back when now, admittedly.
Yeah, way back when. But they haven't shown us that, they drifted away from that completely towards the end of the league. Yeah, like, again, the league conditions are completely different to Championship as well. Like, we've played many a match where we've played against a team in the league, and it's in January or February, March, April, whatever it is. And, big heavy pitch, heavy ball, that plays into the hands of, I suppose, the underdog, because you can drag it into a bit of a dogfight. This is going to be completely different. You meet Limerick and Croke Park. Wexford can go toe to toe with them for a while, but I don't think they would be able to provide the same threats that Clare could provide. We're saying that Wexford could beat Clare this weekend because they're missing 2 really important players, and it's bringing Clare back towards Wexford a little bit. So that's the reason Wexford could beat them. But if Peter Duggan and Rory Hayes are on the pitch the weekend, I think Clare win fairly handy. It's just that this is a small bit of an upset to Clare going into the game to restructure 2 really, really good players. That's the reason Wexford might. But I still don't fancy Wexford to beat Clare. If they do, if they somehow get over them, I think Limerick beat them well when they played them in Croke Park, because any team that wants to beat Limerick, you have a better chance out of Croke Park again, because the wide open space of Croke Park is a killer for playing against Limerick. They'll potentially steamroll any team in Croke Park that they play for the rest of the championship. There's a potential there with any team that they could do that. Yeah. So I don't think that suits them. I think if Wexford played them maybe in Semple Stadium, they maybe have a little bit more of a chance. And this is not getting into pitch dimensions or anything like that. But Croke Park and Limerick is a completely different gauntlet to Thurles and Clare missing 2 of their best players. Completely different thing. So no, if for me now, and it's no offence to Wexford, I don't think they're in a position to go and overturn Limerick at the moment. But you ask me that about any other team at the moment, there's very few teams who I think are in a position to go over and overturn Limerick.
Be a gauntlet and a half if you were to beat Clare, Kilkenny and Limerick to win All-Ireland. So if Wexford were to, say, repeat 1996, that would be some run from them if they were to do so. I'm going to give S. Faulkner 2 from the Instagram here. First of all, shout out to Big Tom Lynch, who obviously must be a friend of his, leaving Vietnam today, swapping all Asian titles for All-Ireland. So there you go. And the question from S. Faulkner 95, I'll give this to you, Skell. Will Clare fade away possibly after putting everything into the Munster final and still losing? Like, there is that possibility of an emotional hangover as much as the tiredness from the Limerick game, to go toe-to-toe with the All-Ireland champions and then lose in extra time. Is there that possibility that Clare are a little bit off it when it comes into this game against Wexford at the weekend?
No, I think actually their biggest obstacle at the moment is to get over the distraction of the two lads getting potentially suspended. Once you part it up, like, everything else is pointing to their stock rising. They've put in a fantastic year so far. They've put up to the Ireland champions, who are we think head and shoulders above the rest. So they have perfect reason to be happy about with their year so far. Will they fade away? They've no reason to. I can't see why they would, unless they encounter hip injuries. And next thing, the morale just drops. But I can't see that happening. I can see no reason why they don't go down on Saturday and, truthfully speaking, blitz Wexford. Yes, they're missing two of their best players, but like Murph was saying, they seem to have a panel developed, and then bring in two fellas who will slot in, and they continue as business as usual, I'd imagine. I'd be interested. I think a key thing for Clare is, like, Tony Kelly has got to be fit. Like, he just has to be fit, and he has to be buzzing for them to produce the kind of performance they did against Limerick on a day-to-day basis. If he's fit, I give Clare every chance, all the time. Fading away, that's a bit strong of a term. Like, will their performances dip? Possibly, yeah, absolutely. Their performance could dip. Like, the thing is now, we expect Limerick to produce a level of performance that they do produce every day, to be honest, repetitively, and they do, in fairness. And now we've looked at Clare, and they've played Limerick twice, and they've produced a supreme performance in home ground, I might say. And now we're saying to Clare, right, we're expecting to produce that again in Thurles on Saturday. That mightn't happen, you see. That might not happen. They mightn't get the huge support and the whole hysteria around it all. It mightn't become such a spectacle like it was 2 weeks ago. It just mightn't happen. They might actually have to grind someone out. So be it. And if you come through Wexford and you go up to Kilkenny to play them, or go up to Croke Park to play Kilkenny, that's a dogfight no matter what happens. I don't care what any happens. Those devils are just they'll dogfight Clare all the time, to say. And Kilkenny have a good history against Clare, so again, that's a tough one. So I don't see them steamrolling anybody. I don't see them replicating the heights of the Limerick performance every day. And again, I'm open to correction here. They could, but and then if you're to ask me the question, well, who's going to be in the Ireland final right now? I'd have to say Limerick and Clare.
Look at him, right? So Evan Ronan was also in contact on Instagram. Easy question: who's going to get to the All Ireland final? Well, you've got Skehill's answer there. I'm also going Clare and Limerick. Murph, can you argue against those two right now on current form?
So basically you're asking me, how do I argue Kilkenny
against Kilkenny?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm interested to hear this now. I want to hear this.
Well, see, I was actually thinking about it during the week, because I said this conversation is coming down the line. If our predictions are right, this conversation is coming. Now, what I will say, actually, just
sit back there.
Yeah. Go on. I'm ready for this.
Say is going into about the last one, just about the hangover with Clare. I actually don't think there's a hangover with Clare. I think the only thing after the Munster final would be a physical fatigue. They've had 2 weeks, which is fine. I actually think their stock has risen since the Munster final. Like, often you'd have two teams, let's say in the Munster final, and let's say you have Tipperary and Waterford. We'll use two neutral teams. Tipperary and Waterford go in, and they're both evenly keeled, and Waterford lose, for let's say, and suddenly now they're going, oh geez, we're after losing. It's a knock of the confidence. Like, Clare's stock is after rising after the Munster final again. I mean, their support couldn't be prouder of them after a Munster final. Confidence, they almost turned over the All-Ireland champions, and the All-Ireland champions were on great form that day. Like, they had Seamus Flanagan absolutely flying it. They had great performances all over the pitch. So they didn't even play a bad, or a flat Limerick team. They hurled really well. I think the only thing, I don't think there's a hangover. I think the only thing would be maybe a little bit of physical fatigue if they're carrying a few knocks, and that's it. But in terms of emotion or anything, I think, they're still mad for road. They're still looking forward to it. They're hungry for any challenge. So that's just, my 2 cents on the whole hangover. But how could I argue for a Kilkenny-Limerick final, let's say? And again, we're after writing off all the other teams, Galway or Cork or whoever could potentially play Limerick here. But let's say it's Limerick in the final. How do Kilkenny get there?
Here we go.
The one thing I was thinking about during the week was that, again, let's say Clare win the weekend, which I think Clare will win. Clare are going to be hotly tipped going into this, and we'll be picking holes into why Kilkenny aren't going to win this and the matchups and why they can't. The one thing I would say, and from being on the pitch with Kilkenny and being off it, Kilkenny are well able in one match to get their matchup so right that it just completely grinds a team to a halt and just get over the line. And the example I use was, when was the last time Limerick lost an All-Ireland or lost in the championship? We played against Cork in the quarter final in 2013 or 2019. Just got over the line. Cork were poor, we weren't great, but people were going into that semi-final going well done to Kilkenny. Even our own supporters were saying it, well done to Kilkenny.
I, by the way, openly on the radio tipped against you in both games.
Yeah, but it was understandable. Completely understandable. We weren't showing huge form going into it, but one targeted match where you picked out who was going with who, literally down to that, who was following who, what's your jobs, bring it into a dogfight, and see from there. And again, the other side of it is Limerick will have been on the road for a few weeks. So again, I'm talking about that physical fatigue again. Clare, should I say, will have been on the road for a few weeks, so there's physical fatigue. So that's where I'm saying Kilkenny's opening is. And like Kilkenny will be happy enough going into that semi-final, if it is to be a Kilkenny-Clare semi-final, because obviously there is a few permutations there that could play out. Kilkenny will go into that kind of underdogs, maybe not expecting to win it. The Clare bandwagon's going to be up and running. I can tell you from the Kilkenny boys' perspective, absolutely love that. That's petrol to the bonfire. They love it. Is it 100% sure to win it? No, absolutely not. But I could very much picture us coming out to Croke Park that weekend, me busting to do a podcast that evening because I'd love to talk to Skehill.
My Wi-Fi won't work.
That's yeah.
Won't be working.
No, that's the only reason I'm saying it. Like, I wouldn't be going now if Clare, let's say Clare beat Wexford the weekend. I wouldn't be going, sure, that's us done, Kilkenny. There's no way we're going to beat them. I think Kilkenny have a few cards to play there that all it has to do is work for the day against Clare, and that's all it'll be focused on. And there's potential to turn them over. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot can happen between now and then. So from my point of view, look, I know the Kilkenny attitude will be, we're happy to be in All-Ireland final, give us whoever and we'll go and play it. So I'm happy enough where Kilkenny are sitting at the moment.
I think provisionally on this day 2 weeks we're going to Limerick for an outside broadcast, so I'm already looking forward to some of this being played back to us if anything changes in these two quarterfinals at the weekend. But they're both going to be great. They're both on RTE this coming Saturday, so you've got Galway against Cork 1:45 on Saturday, and then you've got the 3:45 start for Clare against Wexford. We've also got the two All-Ireland minor hurling semi-finals. I want both of you to think about who your best young hurler in the senior championship has been this year too, because that's going to be a question we answer in a moment. But we'll look a few years before that to the minors. We'll hear in a second from Leo O'Connor, the Offaly manager, who's been speaking about what Limerick did, which I thought was quite interesting, lads, because he's managed pretty much all of the current Limerick senior team. It's remarkable how they all seem to come through in 2 or 3 waves, one after another. So he's involved in managing Kyle Hayes, Declan Hannon, Graham Mulcahy, was involved in the production line basically in Limerick for about 10 years. He's been involved with Offaly for the last 4, and they've been to 2 Leinster finals in that period, won one, lost one. Won their first Leinster minor in 22 years. They've had a month now off before playing against Clare. That's Semple Stadium, 7:30 on Friday, because the GAA don't like putting minor games in before seniors since it's gone back to under 17. So we've got 2 standalone fixtures. But before we hear from Leo about what Limerick did to turn things around, Skehill, you're going to be involved as your Mayor Forna, or you'll be your Mayor Ishka, or whatever bib they can give you for this weekend at the Gaelic grounds. Tipperary against Galway, 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. What kind of shape are Galway in, having come through this round robin now, to play a Tip team who haven't played for a month going into this?
Yeah, I suppose they haven't played for a month, but they're quite a seasoned team. You could say at minor stage they came through a good Munster stage. They produced a good, I suppose, a heart-stopping final, you could say, against Clare, which so they're battle-hardened. That's the first thing. They've had time to recuperate injuries. I don't think they've had the issue with football as we've had in Galway. Obviously some of our guys are playing the minor football as well, and we're playing yesterday against Dublin, so it's tricky trying to find a balance in that perspective.
Is that a really hard balance to find, Skehill? Because last night, I don't know if you heard it, so the Twitter Spaces was on. I'm sure we'll get dragged into this in a few weeks' time when the hurling gets into the business end for us to be guests on the show. But Di Regan was on talking about the hurling from the weekend, and almost at the start of the pod he announced that he was leaving the club team Shamrocks that he's involved with, because he felt that there was too much of a pull for players who were playing dual to be doing more with the footballers than they were doing with the hurlers. Has that been a difficult pull at minor level, or is there a good balance in Galway between the two panels?
I think there's a good balance, in fairness. I think, like I say, between Fergal Healy and Alan Glynn, they've come to good terms and they seem to have good structure in place, but you always have to be conscious of the workload of the and I was going to say child, that's what they are. You know, they're under 18, like they're kids. Some of them are actually doing their junior cert, you know, so it's not as if we're talking about seasoned adults here. So you have to be very mindful of them on a personal level, that you don't actually burn them out by playing them week on week, and then you have to manage their training loads, etc. Look, I'm not involved in that kind of side of things, but I do see the challenges that it can present at club level as well from our own perspective. So I think we've managed that okay. The guys have managed it all right. And look, it's going to be a big test. Like, Tip are strong, they've scored a lot of goals, they've conceded no goals, so it's going to be a massive test for our lads. They seem to be a more physical team than us, so it's just going to be a battle. Look, it's what you want them lads to be doing. You want them to go down to the Gaelic grounds and go down to hurlers in these grounds and taking on the big counties and develop them, because that's what it's all about. It's lovely to win Ireland, and we'd love to do it, great for them lads, but you want them to be able to get as much exposure to big games, big grounds, and then develop them on to the next stage, where we can produce them at under 20 and then ultimately go back to your man's question earlier on, get them into senior in the fastest method possible. So that's the name of the game.
Yeah, it's the junior cert point is one that came up when I was chatting to Leo O'Connor yesterday on the radio, that it's funny how once upon a time the minor became an issue because you were trying to schedule it so there were games before the leaving cert and after the leaving cert, and now it's the junior cert. And he was saying I think it's 6 of his panel are sitting a junior cert exam in the afternoon on Friday, and then they get their gear bag and they go to Thurles to play a game at 7:30, which is far from ideal. But he was saying, look, it's one of those where it works out nicely for both sets of supporters in their case, where Clare have got their senior quarter-final on Saturday and Offaly have got a Talton Cup semi-final on Sunday. And it would have been terrible if the fixture had been on either day and supporters had to pick. It's easy enough for them to go to Semple on Friday night. There'll probably be 4,000 or 5,000, you would think, going to the game, and it should create a nice little atmosphere for that All-Ireland semi-final. We can hear from Leo O'Connor now, because when I was speaking to him, I asked him about what Limerick had done, because by his own admission, Limerick were at a pretty low ebb when they put in their hurling plan just over 10 years ago to try and develop elite hurlers. And this was his explanation of what Limerick did and where he feels Offaly are by comparison right now.
Not about any one individual. There was Gerard Hegarty was involved, Shane Fitzgibbon, Mike Galligan, Frankie Carroll, all guys that played hurling with Limerick over the years. And then you have Joe McKenna, ironically a man from Shinrowan, born reared in Shinrowan, Offaly, that's fronting the whole thing now. So from that point of view, it's imperative, and that's what we did in Limerick. We made it that Saturday mornings was underage development squad from 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to 1 o'clock in the day, and that's how we developed them. We only looked for 5 hours off of the county board in Oak, and just made that crystal clear. This is what we want. They're going 48 weeks of the year. They're 4 weeks off, and it's so important from the strength and conditioning point of view, and how you develop an ethos. We had a big battle in Limerick because of the success of Munster rugby at the time. And look, Limerick has been consistently there now for the last 5-6 years, and we didn't win a minor. Ironically, we didn't win a minor, but we contested all our minor semi-finals in 2013, 2014, 15. We were beaten in the Munster final, so we started getting players off of these teams. We won a Munster under 21 in 2011, and it all filtered through over a period of time. When they get to 18, 19 years of age, they're number one, they're physically strong enough at that stage, some of them were to come through. And then, we've late developers, and that it all helps, and you'll always get that. So once you have a core base of players coming through, the 3 or 4 every year off a team, that's what Limerick is based around now.
Not to look at any individuals within the system, but just in a very general sense, 2 finals out of 3 years in Leinster for this group of Offaly minors that have been coming through. Compared to, say, where Limerick were at, and you're saying it was probably Limerick coming from a low enough ebb, but then having to build on a consistent basis over a series of years. How far is Offaly set up now away from maybe where Limerick would have been when it started to bear some fruit?
First and foremost, you've just got to look now, and as you said, where Offaly are now. It's going to take probably 5-6 years before these lads are going to be fully physically developed, right? The training conditions that these guys now are trained under below faithful fields, it's a credit to the Offaly County Board. It's first class. The only other performance-based facility that I know that can compare to Offaly is UL in Limerick, and I'm sure there are others around the country. I know they're below Carlow, below Cork and all these places. But if you look at it on a consistent basis, Offaly have the facilities now. They have the 4 fields outside in Kilcormac, outside in Faithful Fields. They're the best in Ireland, bar none. You have the front field out there. You can compare it to Croke Park, right? It's full size, everything. It's just a matter now of being patient and getting these guys, filtering these guys through. And as I said, over the next 3-4 years, a lot of what has come through over the last 3 years will make their way onto a senior panel, and then it develops from there because they're coming from a winning ethos. It's not the fact that they're winning Leinster finals or anything like that. No, it's just a matter of being consistent, get the leadership skills into them as well, and just let them develop. And let them develop naturally along with the help of the strength and conditioning. And everything has been put in place. In fairness to the Offaly County Board, no stone has been left unturned, be it last year under 20 football level or this year minor hurling level. The stepping stones are there, and it's just a matter of being patient, and Offaly will get back up to where they long to be.
So that was Leo O'Connor about what happened in Limerick. It seems in a way very modest, but also when you see other people replying to it, compared to some counties, the idea of having 5 hours of contact with the players per development panel each week and they trained for 48 weeks was a big leap forward from what Limerick have been doing previously. And you can see when it comes to strength and conditioning and the type of hurlers that are there currently on their senior panel, it had a big impact. So that was Leo O'Connor chatting ahead of their game this week, and also probably peeling back the curtain a little bit of what Limerick have done previously. When it comes to young hurlers, lads, before we hear from Derek McNicholas about Westmeath's year, Cathal Mac 79 was in contact on Instagram. Who would be their best young player of the championship so far? So I've drawn the parameters for you off air on this, because otherwise we could get into a mess where we go under 20s, minor, working out the kind of Raheem Sterling, Trent Alexander-Arnold, 23, 24. They're lads who could fit in there in a fuzzy way of being young hurler. We're picking probably a young player. Can I throw the parameter that they're probably around under 22, first couple of years in championship, and we'll do it based on their senior championship this year. Is that fair?
Yeah, well,
yeah, that's fair.
Right, go on.
Yeah.
Murph, do you want to go first? Who are you nominating?
I'll go Cathal O'Neill for Limerick.
Okay.
Again, I suppose, look, we've been talking about the performances there of Seamus Flanagan the last day, and Diarmuid Burns and all these lads, but he's a lad who's been trying to find his feet within an exceptional Limerick team, and he's a young man. Unfortunately we didn't get to see him at the under 20 grade, because I think we would have really seen the difference and the depth of his talents at that stage. But look, really good player. Has also then had to fill in or attempt to fill the boots of Cian Lynch, and now no one was expecting him to do it, but basically hurl centre forward in a Limerick team. And I think John Kiley looks at the centre forward position the same way he looks at centre back position, and Declan Hannon has been holding that down and is a leader there. So if Cathal O'Neill step in there and has done a really good job, I'd be really happy with what he's done. He puts in a really good shift when he's out there. Again, I think we're going to just see a lot more from him as he physically develops, because you're still developing as a player at his age. And I think he's put in a really good shift. Other years maybe we've looked and we have really obvious players who are hanging up goals every week and all these different things and outstanding performances. But I just think for the role he's had to do in that Limerick team for this year, and again in the Clare game, popped up a few times as well. I just think he's had a good year. So my one so far for this year anyway is Cathal O'Neill Limerick.
Who are you going for, Skehill?
Yeah, that's a fair point by Paul. I say, and I was just looking at kind of a different aspect. I went for Alan Connolly in Cork. I mentioned him earlier, and I was saying, what kind of influence did the young fella have on the team? And I just think back at the Clare game. Yes, you could say that they were dead and buried, but he popped up with a couple of goals, gave them a bit of life, and he seems to have, at his young age, he seems to have hardened them a small bit. And you consider that he produced a good performance down in Walsh Park against Waterford, and it's like he's now operating at a set full forward position. So he's like their guy. So I have to go with him because he was thrust into a unit, and this is the reason I went for him. Cathal O'Neill, yes, he was thrust into a position whereby he was quote unquote filling the boots of Cian Lynch, but he was thrust into a unit that was highly functional at a very good level with fantastic clientele around him and a great management team, you could say. So that's he was kind of put on the front foot, if you like, So he was given every opportunity to thrive. Whereas Alan Connolly, with respect, was put into kind of a dysfunctioning unit. They had got off to a bad start. He was operating at a very tough position in the full forward line with players around him who weren't exactly producing the goods that they were expected to produce, and then he's kind of made the position his own. So I'm going with him, and I think, let's say, again, I know I mentioned Hoggy earlier on, let's say, for Galway to stop, and I think it'll be a good battle. I'd say Dahi would be in on top of Alan Connolly or vice versa, and you need to do well to shackle him down these days.
Yeah, no, it could be a really good battle this weekend, right, lads? That's almost where I take my leave of you, because we're going to bring in Derek McNicholas now, because, full disclosure, recorded the interview a bit earlier today, because he just had a bit of a break in work to do so. Tell me about this guy, Davy Glennon. Did you know what his nickname was before this chat comes up? What was Davy Glennon's nickname?
Well, we've a few nicknames from now, right?
Right, go on.
But we could have given him 20 nicknames. So it could have been anything for his off the field antics. It could have been for his on the field antics. It could have been for his fashion sense or his spending attributes. Do you
want to know his Westmeath nickname then? It's Louis Vuitton.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. I have no issue with that. I can see the reasons why.
Apparently there was a team bonding holiday last week, and they went to Edinburgh, and most lads had their gear bag or their rucksack over their back. Full Louis Vuitton was Davy Glennon's way of travel.
Well, I tell you one thing. We went. He came on my stag 5 years ago, right?
Nice.
And we went back to, was that the second day or third day of the stag? Actually, I can't remember. But anyways, there was a few bags left over, and the publican rang me and said, "We'll take away these bags." One of them was Davy's anyway. And I opened his wash bag. I swear to God, it was worth €500. Like, not the bag, the contents of the bag. I looked in and went, "Jeez, that's some expensive stuff he's got in there." Needless to say, I never get back to him. I still have it.
It's fair to say he's got bags to match what's inside them now at the moment, by the sounds of it. I have a feeling with all of this kind of slander of Davy Glennon, we'll probably have to get him on one of these weeks to maybe defend himself against Skehill, but we'll see how we go. Lads, thanks a million for joining us on episode 17. Looking forward to chatting to you after the quarterfinals next Monday.
Sound lads.
Cheers, boys. See.
Right, so that was Skehill and Murphy. This is the conversation I had with Derek McNicholas a little bit earlier today, where we started by talking about the fact that he's been playing for the Westmeath senior hurling team since his minor year of 2004.
Yeah, it's been a long road, I suppose, to being in Division 1 in the league and being in Liam McCarthy in the same year for next year, I suppose, is exciting for Westmeath people. But yeah, it's a long time since 2004. I was still a minor. I was telling you earlier on that I actually wasn't even meant to be on the panel that first day. I was still playing minor, I think, the day before. And I actually think I was out the night before, and I was just brought as in to make up a few numbers, and I eventually been thrown on in the Leash game, and I actually think I got a goal, so I was kept on from there.
Right, how did that happen then? We have to go right back to the outset then. How does it get that you're on the minor panel where generally you should be allowed to enjoy yourself after playing for the minors, and next thing you're on the pitch against Leash? What happened?
I think it was Mick Cosgrove. He was our club manager at the time, and he was mad to get me into the senior, get up to the senior pace, get onto the senior team as well, the club team. And he nabbed me on a Sunday morning. He goes, "We're going to Port Leash, there's a qualifier game on." He said, "Just putting you on the panel." That kind of twisted my arm. I said, "Yeah, right, I'll come and just see what it's like." And I was sitting there, and halfway through the second half, I seen him waving me down. I was like, "Oh no, you're not serious." So I came on anyway. I didn't even know who. I think it was Barry Kennedy at the time I replaced, and managed to get me hand on the ball and score a goal. And we were beaten in the end, but that was the start to being in the senior setup.
What's the key to the longevity then? Because if you stick around for next year, and you probably have to think about that now, and you're adapting to a different role, coming off the bench for some of the games now, as opposed to being a nailed-on starter within the team. So that decision probably has to be made at the end of this year. But if you stay around for what will be heading into your 20th year, you missed a couple along the way when you were away, but you're still going to bank up into a 19 season if you play next season. What keeps you motivated and going, Derek, when you're going into, you're 38 later this year?
No, I'm 37 in August, September. No, I tell you, it's I just training at the highest level possible. Yes, it's great training with club, but I can't lose that itch of going in and train at the highest level. You know what I mean? And playing at the top of whatever, go as far as I can. In I said playing college hurling as well is the very same. That kind of, I'm back to college late. I think it was 26 when I back to college, and I played 4 years for Skehill. And I felt that time has given me the space now to push on, because I'm relatively injury free. And I said playing at that high level, coming into me early 30s, and I was still marking. I remember marking Barry Nash. I was 31, and he was 23 or 4, and hurling really well again. And marking all these. Gerard Hegarty played well in the first round at the Fitz, and like Mark Tom Morrissey, all these boys. And I was really, on top of my game, flying. I just injury free, I suppose, and just that has kept me fresh. And I suppose injection of having to work that little bit harder, everything changes. I suppose diet changes, training wise changes. You're not training as heavy as the other guys are training. You're doing different bits away from everything, but just trying to keep it fresh. And I suppose that hunger to play at the top level, for as long as I can.
Yeah, sometimes look, that drive and enjoyment keeps people going. Like I'm thinking of Ross Munley, Niall McNamee in the football right now, who were around about roughly as long as you. I think they both made their debuts in 2003, and they're still kicking football at championship level right now. Like it takes a remarkable drive to keep going. But that obviously would indicate to me that you wouldn't be able to walk away easily from this Westmeath panel. And look, there's been a few other lads like that. I'm thinking of Owen Price just retiring the year before last, and Brendan Murph retired and then went into your backroom team and came back and played again. There's a fairly long established feeling of lads staying around for a long time in this Westmeath hurling panel.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's playing at the highest level, and I suppose I was unlucky not to win a few club championships. And if I probably did, that might have drove me back to the club, I suppose, and kind of kept driving that on. But the club was kind of through a transition year over the last few years, and I suppose not winning a few club championships, that has kept me. I need to be as competitive as I can, and the only place to be that is within county. And even this year, I wasn't even sure what I was doing. I said I had a chat with Joe Fortune. He rang me a few times, and I was thinking about it. I was telling you earlier, I met Niall McNamee, and we heading away back in November, December this year, and met him on a plane. He was going to Paris. I was going away on my honeymoon. And he says, "Are you going again?" And I said, "Are you going again?" I says, I will if you will," sort of thing. We were having a laugh and joke because we're relatively the same age. He's a bit older than me, but that's kind of why, just it's playing at that top level. It's hard to switch off from that.
Well, look, Offaly footballers still need Niall McNamee, top scorer in the Tailteann Cup right now. So if you could please go back in next year just to ensure that he keeps that promise that he made, that'd be great. I mean, I'd be happy both of you playing next year, but it'd be great if you could lock Niall in to play for next season too. Like when it comes to this year, like as you mentioned, the great thing is going into next season for Westmeath, you're in Division 1 of the Hurling League and you're going to be in the top flight. You get to play in the Leinster Senior Championship again next season, and it'll be the GAAGO Cup getting swapped for the Welsh Cup to try and prepare for those big matches next year. Like, you've had a few flirts with Division 1 over the last few years. It's been difficult. Like, I remember 2 years ago, there was a really good performance in the midst of it, but there were difficult games against Limerick and against Cork and against these teams who went on to All-Ireland finals. But was it a good learning experience to actually play in Division 1 when you were there?
It was brilliant. That's where you need to be playing. I said no disrespect to any teams in Division 2, but like coming into the Leinster Championship, we played Division 2. We got we lost a couple of games. As I said, there was a hangover from last year from the league. We really felt that each game we should have won that game. I know Aaron got sent off, and it was overturned. But that game really hurt us, and you could sense it in the first few games of the league. As well as the GAAGO Cup, we weren't invited into the Walsh Cup, was a little bit disappointing. So we went and won the GAAGO Cup, and it says the start of the league was a little stop-start. We got beaten twice, and that famous shut the door and the management thing, it wasn't that at all. It was the players literally going, "Lads, seriously, we need to raise our standards here. Wipe what happened next year. Let's go and win Division 2 and prepare for Leinster. We need to be in Division 1 next year. This team is going to kind of keep going up the ladder, I suppose." And that's where if you're not playing at the top level, you're hurling that little bit slower. You have that little bit more time with the ball. And I was listening, as you mentioned earlier, Michael Fennelly's conversation. He was saying that he thinks playing the Division 2 maybe, or Division 3 or whatever, playing that little bit slower so you can breed players in. I don't agree with that at all. I think you need to be playing at the top level in all competitions. For Westmeath to kind of make a claim, I suppose, and get up the ladder and take on the Wexfords, Kilkennys, Dublins, and beat them. That's what I've been thinking about that.
And I would think it probably depends a little bit on the age profile of the team too. Like your Westmeath side right now, it's got to a point now where there are a lot of very exciting young lads who are coming through, but now they're in their mid-20s and they're ready for this challenge and trying to bring their hurling to the next level. Like, we're no longer talking about Niall O'Brien being a youngster or the Doyles. They now have got plenty of championship experience. And all right, there's some lads coming through, like say Jack Gillen, who's had a really good year this year. But generally, like, your team are getting to that age profile now where I suppose you need to test yourself against the very best if the level is going to come up for Westmeath.
Definitely, like Jogger and Angus and Robbie and all these guys, they're 29 now, so they're hitting their 30 next year. So like, we've kind of gone through the graw of up, down, and now we're in Division 1, now we're in Lee McCarthy, and we really need to, next year, we keep talking about this scalp, but we need to beat one of these teams. We need to beat Dublin. And I genuinely believe if this year, I think it took us 2 or 3 games to get up to the pace. By the time Wexford came around, we really found our feet in the Leinster Championship and kind of were starting to get up to the pace. Kilkenny, 35, 40, 50 minutes, we're kind of, trying to reach the pace. Galway was just go to Pearse Stadium. It was a whitewash. We were really disappointed with that performance, and sort of draw a line to us, get ready for the dubs. And I really think we let ourselves down against Dublin. We didn't get going at all. And I said, come Wexford, we were up at the pace. And I think next year you should be looking at beating the Wexford, beating Kilkenny, beating Dublin. That's realistic targets coming out of Division 1. You need to be eyeballing them. So.
Did Wexford feel like a scalp? I know it was a draw as opposed to a win, but like, even just looking at the scenes afterwards and after you scored your goal, it felt like a massive championship night. And like, there was all the romance around it too. And even Joe was mentioned afterwards that there was a joy of Westmeath supporters coming onto the pitch and looking for autographs from you guys and all those kind of nice scenes afterwards, which felt like a really, really meaningful result. Like, I look back through Westmeath results over the last 20, 30 years. And for me, like, obviously the McDonagh Cup finals mean more and the Christie Ring to actually get silverware. But that Wexford result, like going up against a Tier 1 county who were provincial champions back in 2019, it's probably right up there with what Westmeath did against Galway in the mid-80s in the league.
Definitely. I wasn't even meant to play that day. I kind of had hurt my leg earlier in the week, and I was kind of looking at Laois maybe just hold out. And as the game went on, Joe kind of looked up and he goes, have you got a few minutes in? And I said, I have, because the crowd was, the hair standing back your neck with the crowd, it was going. And it did feel like that. So it was strange, I suppose. We drew that game and we were on a high, but yet we had a massive job coming down the line against Laois the week after. And I suppose coming back into training, I was just kind of reiterating, like, we have no God-given right to get down to Port Laois anyway, more or less overconfident, because we had been beaten there most times. I mean, I think we won 2018. That was the last time we won down there. So it was sort of from such a high to come back down to earth but there was, I suppose, a major confidence there that we says, we're after Wexford are one of the fittest teams in Ireland at the minute, and I suppose to match them for 70 minutes and still, get the last score of the game to draw it, I suppose that gave us massive confidence that time.
Yeah, because I think it was really important, because early in the championship you played really well against Kilkenny, and everyone was probably watching the halftime score and thinking, geez, Westmeath are right in this. And then Kilkenny wheeled out some of their big guns like TJ coming on, and they got the result. And it's kind of a pat on the back. Well done, Westmeath, for playing well for a period of the game. Against Dublin, you ran them right up till about 6 or 7 minutes to go and had that one quite close and nearly got the result. To actually, get to level pegging with Wexford at the end of that game has to feel like something really significant, that it wasn't a case of, the patronising conversation, which was, Westmeath hurled well for an hour but weren't there at the end. To actually be there right at the end and to get a result and to get that point up on the board must have meant an awful lot to you as a group.
It was massive. And then you saw Kilkenny, we were so disappointed after that game. Can you see the scoreline? We were kind of going, that didn't reflect what happened on the field. We really thought 45, I think Cormac was sent off in the 50th minute or so, and then I suppose our bodies were tired. We were kind of trying to run in lads to kind of, TJ come on, and he wanted to get his name as his first game back, I suppose, and there was other young lads coming in off the bench, and they were mad to bore holes in us, more or less. They wanted goals, and I suppose they ran in a couple of goals, and that kind of killed the scoreline. But the Dublin game was the Galway game, as I said, was a bit of a whitewash. It's hard to even get down to Pearse Stadium. You need to be on top of your game to really push them up there. And I suppose we lost a couple of guys to a couple of injuries as well. And having 20 or 30 lads at the same level it's really hard for a team like Westmeath when there's only 8 senior teams in the championship, and I think it's 7 or 8 of the intermediates. But just strength and depth of the panel just probably wasn't able to. You're playing the same 22 or 3 lads all the time, and I suppose come down to Pearse Stadium when you're under pressure, it's really hard to even win your own ball. I suppose Galway are physically very strong as well. Dublin, I said, that was the one that really lads were really annoyed after that game. I remember Killian coming in and kicking the helmet. He was raging because he really wanted to get a result there, and I suppose we thought Dublin was the one that we were in Mullingar, on a wet day. It says this really suits us, and we kind of just didn't push. We didn't push where we should have. We should have, put the foot in the throat. Killing it in for a goal. I think he hit it wide, and that was 3 or 4 minutes to go, and we were right in the game. So that was really disappointing, I suppose. Then Wexford, we had 2 weeks to prepare for Wexford, and we really, really prepared for that. We didn't look at Laois. We says we go flat out for Wexford and get up, be at that pace. Don't rest anyone. Everyone wanted to play. They wanted to be, playing against the best teams. And I suppose it was a massive night in the end that we got the point, I suppose.
That focus, Derek, is a hard thing to do, because when the fixtures came out, your eye is naturally drawn to what's the point that Laois and Westmeath are going to play each other, because realistically the expectation would be that the other 4 teams are competing for 3 spots, and that the result between Laois and Westmeath is probably going to determine who's going to be relegated as long as Kerry don't win the Joe McDonagh. So naturally, when you see that as the last fixture, you're thinking that almost feels like a relegation playoff set up beforehand. And even with your point against Wexford, going down to play against Laois was effectively a relegation playoff. You still to avoid defeat to stay in the Leinster Championship for next year. But genuinely, I get the feeling that you guys weren't thinking that was the only fixture that mattered. You were actually targeting trying to get results in the other fixtures too.
Definitely, we didn't even look. Joe just was game 1 of 5, game 2 of 5, game 3. We never thought about Laois. We never looked at that game until the week of that game. That's the way we approached this, and we really thought we had 3 games in Mullingar, and we said we can definitely get a result here somewhere, and we were really focused. But I said, coming out of Division 2, I reckon if we had Division 1 league behind us, we definitely would be up to the pace for Kilkenny. The fitness would have been up for Division 1 for Liam McCarthy, and I suppose that's kind of where we were at a small disadvantage coming into Liam McCarthy. But Laois didn't come into our thoughts until that week of that game. we played Wexford next Tuesday night. It was all for Laois and getting a result there. And then we were in good confidence. We're not being over cocky at all because we know right to Laois are a super team and really hard betting Laois. But that's when the focus came to Laois, was the week of that game.
And how good you were in a Moore Park that day too, when like everything was on the line for survival for next season. And like something that really stood out to me too is that, you know, Niall Mitchell took his chances and went for goal that day. I remember watching the league final against Down, and Niall was almost being too kind and being too generous in what he was doing. He was trying to flick the ball off to other players and give them chances, but he was so clinical. Like even I think of his first goal, which he just bombed in from distance, that he had one thought, and that was to go for goal. And there was a real kind of clinical edge about you in Portlaoise that night.
Yeah, we'd always say to Mitchell, will you just get ticked and take lads on and take your own score, because he's huge. He's a huge man and he's unbelievable skill. So like when you're seeing him taking his scores and like that just shows his confidence is up. I kind of was saying to Joe Fortune, like if we put Mitch in the edge of the square, I don't believe there's a back in Laois that can hold him when he's confident, because he's such a physically big man. And I suppose he buried 2 goals that day against Laois. And when he's playing well, we generally play well and win. So but yeah, there was a real focus for that game. The forwards, we were getting scores, like we were scoring 118, 119, 120 again. The Wexfords, Kilkenny's, you know, Galway, I think we hit 22 points or 23 points. So we knew we could score, and goals win games at the end of the day. And I suppose Owen Keys came in that day and done really well. He's powerful, he's very fast when he gets the ball, and his job was, if he wins the ball, just run direct at them, because there's only one way to stop him, and it's take him down. And he was strong enough to get in there a couple of goals that day. And it turned out to be a comfortable victory, but by no means was it half time. We kind of just says, let's get in. You know, we're going again. It was a huge win that day, and we went in at half time. I think we were a pint up. We just says, let's start strong. Let's put them on the back foot straight away and press all end roll and buckets, because you know how clinical he is from his buckets. So that was the plan, close down everything. And I suppose the management team's plan really worked that day, and the lads, you know, executed brilliantly.
Were you sick the night of the Sunday game after the Wexford game? Because I think you scored, like, say, one of the most significant goals of your career. You're thinking, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to rewatch this now on the TV. And next thing you realise that the camera seems to be a camcorder from the 1980s, which is zoomed out. I think you would have had a better view standing on the roof at Dunstores than the actual TV camera. I'd love to say I saw your goal against Wexford, but the camera was out so far, I barely saw it. I think I saw the reaction after the goal went in. So I remember the radio commentary more than actually seeing it on TV. Was it frustrating to see that beautiful footage had not been captured of this lovely moment for Westmeath and for you personally?
Yeah, it was. To be fair, it was unfortunate, because there was a lot of really good scores shown on the Sunday game that evening, but you couldn't see them. I think Kevin Regan came on and got a super pint, and Davey got a super pint. Niall O'Brien was brilliant that day, but you couldn't see anything. It's a pity they didn't contact Westmeath, because we get the analysis obviously after the game to do our own kind of bit of work on, and we have a really good camera from the other side, the stand side, and it's just a pity the Sunday game didn't use that side of the video, because you could have seen everything very clearly. And I said it was the video was horrendous. I don't know where it came from or whose it was, but yeah, it was disappointing not to be able to show that off for that you know, that result, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a pity, because like I kind of always say this about hurling, like there's such a great opportunity to showcase like fantastic games. Because I watched a few of the Joe McDonagh matches this year, and particularly Antrim against Offaly, their first game in the Joe McDonagh was remarkable. Just a really, really good game, tit for tat, goals flying in all over the place, late goals for both teams in injury time, and Antrim just get over the line at the end. Then I watched the Offaly against Kerry game, which was a complete and utter score fest, and like the final was really, really entertaining too. And I'm just thinking, Derek, like you've played in the Joe McDonagh a bit in recent years. Like if this product gets a little bit more promotion, there's really good matches to watch here.
Brilliant, yeah. And I watched the Joe McDonagh, and it was Kerry and Antrim really went at it, and there was didn't look like there was much tactics. It was sort of, you know, 15 on 15, and let's go at this sort of thing. And yeah, there's been brilliant games through the Joe McDonagh, and it probably doesn't get deserved, you know, some of the recognition that should get like so. Even the Christie Ring, there's really good teams. Them you have to realise them teams are training as hard, if not more, than any of the top teams. So I really do believe that, you know, without them teams, GAA is really at nothing. You know, you can't just focus on the 5 or 6 big teams. You have to give the Nicky Rafford and the Laurie Matters and Chris Ring, they have to get a bit of, you know, television coverage, because I said, you know, their trainings, I'm doing the Lee Madden through the GPA, and I'll be talking to loud hurlers, and they're training flat out, you know what I mean? And they're watching their diet, you know, nothing changes from whatever competition you're in. So I definitely think, you know, a bit more coverage of them games should definitely be on the GA's agenda.
Yeah, look, I think particularly maybe hurling was a bit too quiet about itself for a while, but football, basically before it even happened, when the Tailteann Cup came in, we're worried about this becoming Tommy Murphy 2.0. So as a result, it was like, this has to get coverage. So therefore, RT get locked into the semi-final and the final, and Croke Park is guaranteed, and then GAAGO are showing matches because they're really worried if it's not promoted in year one, it might fall. Kind of the tiers were accepted in hurling, and naturally, look, there has to be tiers because of the difference between the teams. But as a result, you kind of 1 year TG Carr showing the McDonagh Cup final, RT showed it this year. There's very little streaming outside of, say, the odd game, and that might be down to a county board finding an arrangement to show it. I think it should get equal footing with the Tailteann, where the Tailteann were able to show stuff on GAAGO. And like even middle of the week just gone by, it took, I think, until Tuesday afternoon, or was it might have been even Wednesday afternoon, when the decision was made that GAAGO were going to show both of the preliminary quarterfinals. Like, to me, that's madness, that you're into the last 8 in the country. The two teams in Kerry and Antrim's case have, you know, they deserve their place in the preliminary quarterfinal because they've just come through the McDonagh. And you don't know if these games are going to be shown or not. Like, Antrim gave a really good showing, particularly in the first half against Cork at the weekend, but no coverage for it, really, or very late decisions to actually show it.
Yeah, I was following on Twitter, and like Corrigan Park's a really, really hard place to go and get a result because, you know, they really make you work up there to get any sort of result. So yeah, look, and I suppose they didn't put Kerry and Antrim captains into the launch of the championship well, which is probably, you know, a really, that the lads, I'm sure, in Kerry and Antrim use that as a bit of ammunition to, you know, for these teams, like, why, let's go and get a result here. And it would have been brilliant to see one of them turn them over, to see, you know, would the GA put their hands up and go, okay, we got this wrong, you know, we should have invited them lads in. They should have been in, absolutely. No way should they miss that GA launch, because they're absolutely a part of the championship, and they definitely should have been showing coverage of that game on live TV, because, you know, the older generation in Antrim and Kerry, like, they don't know how to work apps sometimes, and you know what I mean, there's a big question over that. And I suppose Sky taking, you know, a lot of games that, you know, Mayo and Kildare in the football, for example, because my parents with Mayo, and they didn't see the game because they don't have Sky, and small bits like that, you know, it's a knock-on effect throughout, and I suppose it's frustration, but they can only show so many. But I suppose, you know, having our Irish channels, I suppose, should probably guess the bulk of them games, definitely.
Yeah, I think as a hurling fan, it's the one thing that GA have done very badly, probably since its inception, is trying to promote hurling outside the core group of counties who are incredibly successful. Like, we're happy to sit down, we watch, say, the Munster Championship and tight games and excitement. And don't get me wrong, I love the Munster final, which we saw a few weeks ago, and I can't wait for the quarterfinals, semi-finals and final coming up. But there should be something to try and promote the game outside of there. And it's, as you say, it's a small thing. Like, you bring Antrim along, let them bring the Joe McDonagh Cup for the photos, bring Kerry along. They've had a great achievement getting to the final this year, and, you know, pulling it out of the fire in the last round of the group stage. Bring them along. Don't have it that Kerry have to win a playoff to get into Munster if they win the Joe McDonagh. Don't create these kind of artificial things that are stopping the promotion of the game outside of these core counties. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, poor Kerry are definitely stuck in a really hard position there, because I think if they won, they were playing Tipperary as a preliminary quarter final or something. So that in itself is a massive task. They should be invited straight into Munster in my eyes if they win the Joe McDonagh, you know, win that competition. So, but yeah, look, that's suppose that's not going to be sorted here this evening. It's a fight that's going to continue, I presume, over the next few years to get these teams recognition. And I suppose what the GA are waiting for one of us, so the Antrim, the Laois, is starting beating the Wexford, the Dublins, and I suppose get put into the top table, is what they say. So I suppose that's in our hands now to do that, and that's probably what Westmeath are going to aim at next year, is beating one of them big teams.
I'm looping around here slightly, but you mentioned at the very outset the story that's now probably grown legs about the idea that the management stood out and allowed you guys to have a talk in the middle of Division 2A, and it looked like maybe promotion might be beyond you at that point. Was that just a case of kind of leaders in the dressing room deciding, Derek, it was like, we're not going where we want right now, and we need to bring our performance level up, and that conversation needs to be player-led?
Yeah, definitely. It was by no means anything got to do with management, anything got to do with anything. It was literally the standard of the players wasn't good enough. Like, we had gym programs, we had nutrition, we had to follow nutrition, video analysis, and there was none of that happen. And I definitely think it was a hangover from the league last year. There was sort of lads were kind of sulking that we were back in Division 2 again, and we had to go and try beat all these teams again to get up to Division 1. So yeah, it was absolutely a player standards was not good enough. And I suppose 5 or 6 of the senior players spoke that day, and we all made an agreement leaving the dressing room that we were going to get back to what we were doing last year. We don't like mentioning last year when there's a fresh management team in, but it was definitely more evident that we were doing more work last year on our own and with groups, and group leaders were on top of stuff, and that just had fallen off a small bit, and we probably blamed that for losing a couple of games, although Down were really good, Kerry were really good, or Carlow were really good when they beat us. So that wasn't an excuse. It was just we had to raise our standards, and if we wanted to get out of Division 2, we had one opportunity to do that, and that was beat Kerry the next day, or Clare, sorry, and we done that. We really pushed on that game. Then we Kerry at home, and I suppose get out of Division 2 was the biggest thing. And that final, I wasn't one bit nervous. I felt the team were in a really good position going into that game. All the pressure was probably on Down, because I think they were doing a lot of talking about, the magic of Down playing the big teams, and we never said a word. We just wanted to get out there and do our job. And in fairness to Down, they started really strong, but then Davy crashed home a goal, and that kind of from there, I don't think we ever looked back. We pushed on, and we ran out easy enough in the end. But I said, if that's Down, if we bet Down that day, I don't think we would have won that in the middle of the league. If we beat Down that day, I don't think we would have won the league. We would have just kind of married through the league without, pushing ourselves. And I think that defeat was kind of the defining moment of the league.
When it comes to Davy Glennon, I was at the game in Thurles, and I had the stream open on the laptop in front of me, and the goal, particularly his first one, the one that he shoots across goal, which is like remarkable how he gets the ball out of his stance and has the wrist work to be able to flick it back over into the far top corner. I had to get the stream open on TG Card to have another look just to see how good the finish actually was. Like, he adds that kind of remarkable quality that is there from like the amount of years he played for Galway and playing on a panel that won an All-Ireland title. What an injection of a player to get into your panel over the last few years.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. He's a really likeable character as well. Like, a few of us away last weekend with him, and he blends in with a lot of us. I met him, Ted Leinster, that Super 11s. So I knew him coming in, I suppose, and I was drawn to him straight away. So we've good old banter together. But yeah, look, he's an outrageous cut off his backhand, but when he gets really massive power into shots for such a small lad, and he still has that pace. I think he's 31, but he still has that injection of pace. And when he talks at training, people listen. You can see the Jack Gillans and any of the younger guys, and they listen to him. Derek Clinton is probably, gets on really well, and Davy's probably brought him under his wing and kind of, can see a bit of potential in him. So he's kind of, following what Davy does. And when he talks to dressing room, everyone listens. And that's probably that he was a massive, massive injection into our panel, definitely.
Yeah, I think Skehill was saying he's a bit of crack as well. Like, by his own admission, Davy wasn't able to train totally with you all the time. But the time that he's actually in with the panel, he's a bit of crack and a bit of fun, which you actually need. If you're going through a very difficult campaign and you've got, lots of big targets to hit, you need someone who can actually maybe G up the spirits at different times as well.
Yeah, he's definitely a bit of crack. We kind of nicknamed him Louis. He's all with these Louis Vuitton bags, and we nicknamed him Louis there. So Skehill probably know all about that. But yeah, no, he definitely is that. He's definitely one of the big characters in the dressing room. And I says, when he takes it serious and he talks, we listen and react to it, because he knows how to, he knows what it's like to win. And I suppose having a Ireland winner in your dressing room, definitely take that all day long.
What about the leader you have at the other end of the field? Like, look, all about Jogger Doyle between club and between county here. Like, I thought he spoke remarkably well. He did a piece for the 42 about the idea of the season being over early, because there was a discussion which was used on the Sunday game, and the idea was, look at how well Westmeath have done, but it's an awful pity the Westmeath hurlers don't get to hurl into June. And Tommy was kind of making the point that this is one of the first years where he actually has a defined window since he started hurling, because you're always waiting to see when the county were knocked out and you didn't know when the club championship was going to start. I thought, because we've all talked around the idea of the split season, but he's one of the few players I thought that actually spoke really well about it and laid out the player's position.
Yeah, I completely agree with him. I think this year has been brilliant. We knew, I suppose, kind of the Laois game was sort of our end date if results, I suppose, didn't go our way through the championship, and to have June off is brilliant, because I see all the lads going on holidays. They're all, most county players, that to have that switch off, because usually it's championship over with the county. You might have a week, 10 days, and you're back in with the club, but no wind down. And I think it's been brilliant. And I suppose Tommy is after having one of his best seasons that I've ever seen him playing. He's been absolutely, brilliant. And I suppose he struggled a small bit with confidence over the years, but now he absolutely has his, his head is in the right place. He's in really good form, and when Tommy's good form, he brings everyone along. That's one of his strongest points. Is when if you're going out for a pint, you love having him with you because he's great crack, and he's the life and soul of a lot of parties. But when he's serious, and when I suppose that's his, that was a strong point this year. Is he could allow himself to switch off but still enjoy himself as well. And that's when he's at his best. And this year we really seen that with him.
What an athlete, though. Like, I remember a few seasons ago, he went in on Shamie Callan when Callan was in nearly the form of his career, and Tommy did a remarkable job tight marking and one of genuinely the best forwards around. Like, genuinely, he tends to be detailed on whoever the most important attacker is when you guys are facing them. And as a result, he's gone on a lot of good 14s over the years. And he is so difficult to get past. Like, Tommy is genuinely one of the best defenders in the entire country.
Oh, easily. He's 6'4" or 5", and he probably draws a lot of attention as well. But I said, after that game, he probably struggled a small bit with his confidence for reasons he'll only know, I suppose. But I said this year it was a year I've seen him, in really good form. He's when he's in that good a form off the field, he's really on the field. And I suppose he Mossy Keogh in the first game, he played really well. I don't know who was on against Galway. I think he scored a point off Ronan Hayes. I think Ronan Hayes took off against Dublin. So he was just buzzing, and there was no attitude change. He was just the same person at training. There was no, look what I done or sort of thing. He's just very level-headed, and he brought that in a massive year. And I'm sure there'd be a lot of noise that he gets a decent nomination for an All-Star this year, because I definitely think he deserves it.
Yeah, I think so too. I remember chatting to him a couple of years ago, actually, around about the time when he was getting a little bit of praise for Callan. He did a good job in Canning when you guys had played them in, I think it was a preliminary quarter-final that year too. And he's just so calm about it. He was like, oh yeah, well, Canning will drag you here, so you just got to make sure you don't get dragged out too far. And he's just so matter-of-fact about the way he defends. A real kind of old-school defender in a way, but also remarkably good with the ball when he's gone out the other way. And that's one of the things. You've had so many skillful hurlers, Derek, come through in the last years. I'm even thinking of like the Doyle twins, and Killian's a very young captain right now, but he's not going to end up the full top scorer in the championship. But when you guys exited, he was top scorer in the championship with 59 points. And what a remarkable return from Killian this year as well.
Yeah, Killian's a strong character. I get on very well with him, and he's again, when he talks, people listen, sort of thing. He's young, but he knows what he's about, and he really wants to. He's sick of the moral victories. He's sick of the, oh, well done, you played well, sort of thing. He wants to now win games, and I suppose Killian at that age group to drive Westmeath on for the next few years, and then not just settling for a moral victory, or not just settling for a tap in the back. He kicked his helmet around the dressing room against Dublin because he was that annoyed that we didn't get a result, and I suppose that attitude can only be positive for Westmeath, I suppose, at his age group. I think he's 25 maybe, or whatever he is, but at that age group, the lads come behind him. He needs to probably be captain for a couple more years, because he can bring that drive into everyone, I suppose.
Yeah, because I was chatting to Michael Ryan, your former manager, after the league final, and I said to him, it's great to see Killian and Kieran actually starting to realise their full potential now at senior level. And it's not an easy thing to do, because these two lads banged in 9 or 10 goals between them in a Féile final when they were 12 or 13 years of age, and everyone is hearing about them. And it's the Doyle twins, and they obviously played well for Harney over the last few years too, and a remarkable amount of hype about them at quite a young age. Not everyone actually makes it. You don't necessarily be a superstar at under 13, under 14 and actually end up becoming the county captain.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose Harney, being his club, they're a strong club team, and I suppose he was shooting the lights out with them all year, and then winning the championship. And I suppose it was right that he got his hands on the captaincy, because he had a very good couple of years. I think he was away in the All-Star trip with Paddy Purcell a couple of years back. So he's for such a young man, he's had a lot of experience and a lot of playing at the highest level already. So he played very strongly with DCU as well in college at Fitzgibbon. So he's been around the block, and still, as I said, still very young, and doesn't go around with his head up in the air. That's all about him. It's very much he's very much about Westmeath, and yeah, he probably takes on some outrageous shots from when he should be passing the ball around. But look, that'll come. He'll learn to start being a team player. Where that's probably where I'm now at the minute, trying to link the play, I suppose, and rather being the shooter all the time. So that's, I suppose, Killian is definitely growing. He's going to go on to win lots, I suppose, with his club as well, and hopefully, turn a big team around in Westmeath and be the main man to do that, I suppose.
That's the benefit of experience, because it kind of reminds me a little bit, like, obviously the conversations go on, and we had a lot of people who messaged the show last week and they were like, oh yeah, Tony Kelly did brilliant, he scored 13 points in the Munster final, but he shoots from some outrageous angles, so there's wides when maybe he needs to learn how to mix his game up a little bit. But I think sometimes, like, you tell me what it's like when you're a player beside someone like that. There's some games, like I remember Killian in Croke Park against Laois a few years ago. It was a game that you lost in the Joe McDonagh final, but still, everywhere he shot from, he seemed to score. Like, when you've got someone who's that talented, do you just kind of accept that they might miss some of these low percentage shots, but what their talent means they might score ones that others can't?
Yeah, I suppose it's a hard one. Killian's his initiative is to shoot every time, but I think this year was one of the years that he started actually. Right, I don't need to be doing everything here. I don't need to be, shooting from everywhere. There's, like, you have Niall O'Brien, you have Mitchell, you have Keys, you have Joe, you have Robbie, you have Cormac. You have really talented players around you. You don't need to be shooting from, trying to shoot from everywhere and doing all the scoring. If we can get him on the end of the ball, end of the shot, end of the play to take the shot, then brilliant. He's going to be in the position to score. But I don't think this is one of his years that he didn't actually zone in completely and taking mad shots from mad angles. He really seen the benefit of throwing the ball around to the team, because I said we have really skillful forwards that can score, and even our half back line can score from anywhere. So I suppose that's where his game has started to change a bit.
And tell me this on the final note, like, considering we've just been chatting away now for the last few minutes about all the progress and how important Division 1 is and the excitement of opening Senior Championship again next year, with kind of 20 years coming around on the clock here, if you're fit and firing, it would have to be very difficult to walk away from where Westmeath are at right now. Because I can feel the excitement in your voice about the idea of testing yourself against those top teams. Because I think you'd replace Offaly in Division 1A next year is how it stands. So you'd have to play against Galway, Limerick, Clare, Wexford. That's pretty tasty.
Yeah, look, there's definitely I made no decision or had no chat about it. And I said this time last year, or whenever Joe was appointed, it was September last year. In fairness to Joe, I had a lot of stuff going on personally, and that's one thing I really, from all the managers I had over the years, he really gave you your space. And if everything was happy away from the pitch, come back to me in the best headspace. And I think a lot of players will vouch for that. That was one of Joe's massive strong points, and I really admire him for that, because he gave me space in December and early January that I just needed, and that's kind of when I come back, refreshed and man for action. So I'll definitely have a conversation with Joe again. I'll be giving nothing away yet, but I said I'll talk with ourselves at home as well. But look, the future is bright for Westmeath next year. It's a massive thing. It's the first time in 50 years that we're both Division 1 and Lee McCarthy, and I see my nephew, he's playing minor county at the minute, and really excited about being a Westmeath hurler, which is great to see, where he's a lot of distractions kind of school to rugby and soccer, and he's kind of focused on Westmeath, and his friends are the same. So look, yeah, it's going to be an enjoyable year next year, and we'll see how the rest of the year. Hopefully the club campaign goes really well, and if it does and I stay injury free, then you won't know what happened.
Yeah, I'm not going to retire you on the pod. You always want to leave the jersey in a better place, but I would never force you into that decision to have to say it now. Derek, it's been great to catch up with you. It's great to hear how well Westmeath have done. Before I let you go, you obviously played Wexford earlier this year. How do you reckon they're going to get on against Clare? What looks a very difficult quarter-final for them this coming weekend?
To be fair to Wexford, they have probably the best man markers in their back line. Well, they're definitely going to stick one to Tony Kelly, because I think if Tony's held anyway to a normal game, then Wexford have a really good chance. So I wouldn't write Wexford off. It's in Thurles, it's a massive field, and they're probably both as Clare, they're coming down off a massive Munster final. Like, that was a huge game. And mentally, emotionally, they're going to regenerate themselves to get up to that level again. And I suppose Limerick are obviously the team to beat at the minute, but I still wouldn't write Wexford off. They could still get a result. And I said, hold Tony Kelly, and that's a lot of Clare's firing power is held, I suppose. So I definitely wouldn't write Wexford off in that one. Yeah,
especially if Peter Duggan is suspended and if Rory Hayes isn't able to play. Probably all depends on the appeals during the week. Like, in a way, Derek, it felt like he poked the bear by getting the result against Wexford in Mullingar, because it actually caused them to entirely refocus when they went down to Nolan Park. It's very difficult in this championship to actually call games when you consider what a team can actually achieve in a few weeks. And I'm sure Wexford have been working away quietly in the background, watching what Clare did against Limerick, and they'll probably be out there to give this a right good cut at Thurles on Saturday.
Yeah, I suppose the Wexford game, we were hearing reports that they were kind of focused on Kilkenny and didn't give us kind of, any thought at all. And that really kind of drove us, it was a small bit disrespectful. And I would have heard with Lee and Connor in college. And, we felt like, we were as good as, as good a players as them. We're kind of going like, they really disrespected us. And there was a few, different motivations going on in that week of that game. I said we heard small stories back that it was all about Kilkenny and never even thought about Westmeath. So that was, I suppose, they're probably now, they felt the effect of that, and I suppose that maybe has helped them, on their journey. They went against Kilkenny and their backs against the wall, I suppose. So. But look, Wexford are still a very good team. I wouldn't write them off against Clare. Clare down a couple of men, and I said hold Tony Kelly, and you have a chance against Clare. Put it that way.
Well, look, we'll see what happens this weekend. 5 trophies in recent years for Westmeath, but probably the biggest cup of all, as you mentioned, is being in the top flight in both the league and the championship next year. Derek, thanks a million for chatting to us here in the Hurling Pod.
Cheers. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Bill.